Chapter 678. The more afraid a person was of death, the more he had to think about how not to die. Flesh Massacre was probably one of the most afraid of death among the Earth immortals, so his ability to preserve his life was also top-notch. Therefore, he understood a principle better than the vast majority of people. At the critical moment, only by risking his life could he survive. No matter how strong the opponent's sword was, it was still driven by the person. If he could kill the opponent one step ahead, even the strongest sword momentum would vanish. Therefore, Shuiro too, who had always been afraid of death, was no longer afraid of death at this moment. He forcefully endured the pain and terror of the sword edge entering his body, and focused all his attention on his right hand, where there was a meat cleaver in his palm. However, just as he was about to draw the blade horizontally and cut the opponent in half, suddenly there was a blur in front of his eyes, and Zhu Shiyao actually disappeared without a trace. And the 3-foot sword edge that was inserted in the center of his forehead also disappeared without a trace. Shuiro too was taken aback. He did not care about being embarrassed, and waved the meat cleaver 3 times in a row. Indeed, every slash saw blood, but all of it was his own blood. Because the opponent had disappeared from the arena, the meat cleaver could not cut Zhu Shiyao's flesh, and could only bite back at its master. And after Shuiro too realized this, he could not help but be stunned. Could it be that the opponent gave up and admitted defeat? At the same time, in the audience, people were surprised to see Wang Lu raise his hand high, announcing that he had given up on this match. And beside him, Zhu Shiyao, who was bathed in blood, was looking at him very discontentedly. But why would Wang Lu care about what Zhu Shiyao thought? She had already been transported out. What else could she do? Could it be that she was going to draw her sword at him? That was also fine, anyway. He knew her stellar divine eyes inside out. She could not beat him. The key was, he could not let her die on the arena. The battle just now could be said to be a matter of life and death, but Wang Lu could clearly see that the final result was no more than a loss for both sides, and Zhu Shiyao's chances of winning were less than 20%. The reason was not that Zhu Shiyao was weaker than Lu Li, nor was it that Shuiro too was stronger than Little Poison Immortal. Zhu Shiyao really didn't have a handy weapon. If the Skybreaker was in her hands, just now, Shuiro too would have died first. Unfortunately, although Zhu Shiyao had a peerless sword spirit root, she didn't have enough luck. Lu Li was able to pick up the Skybreaker in the ancient sword tomb, but Zhu Shiyao had used the Great Sun Golden Brilliant Sword all the way until now. It wasn't that the Wanxian League didn't have any immortal treasures, but they weren't suitable for her. In the end, he had lost this battle. Wang Lu shook his head indifferently and was about to start the next battle. However, at this time, the Dixian were unwilling to let him go. In particular, the lamp-burning woman was sneering with malice. Just now, your words were pleasant to hear, but in the end, you still cherished your life and didn't dare to fight. Lu Li dared to fight because you had already used a trick to ensure that her life was not in danger. If it was Zhu Shiyao without the same body insect, you wouldn't dare to let her fight. What she said was right, but Wang Lu's laughter was doubly sarcastic. I said you're stupid, but you still don't admit it. Just now, I abstained from the match in order to save your people's lives. Although Shuiro too is a slaughtering devil, he is an important fighting force in the fight against the fallen immortal. It's enough to kill one as a warning to others. Therefore, for the sake of the overall situation, I did not hesitate to sacrifice a victory for my own side. I didn't expect you to understand with your IQ, but unexpectedly, the people around you also pretended not to know and let you out to bark. These words shocked the crowd of Dixian. This was the so-called inverting black and white, confusing right and wrong. For the sake of the overall situation? Just now, it was obvious that both sides were about to lose, and Zhu Shiyao's chance of winning was even smaller. How could it be that the Wanxian League side showed mercy? Wang Lu only said one sentence to this: why are you so sure that there is no same body insect in Zhu Shiyao's body? She was stabbed in the chest by Shuiro too, but there was no pain on her face. Do you really think it's her own ability? Upon hearing this, the lamp-burning woman was stunned and then argued, but there's no scar on your body. Wang Lu looked at the other side with a look of contempt as if he was an idiot and said, "Who told you that the other same body insect must be in my body?" This argument was really reasonable and made people speechless. The lamp-burning woman was choked and silent for a long time, completely not knowing how to refute. Fortunately, the embarrassment didn't last long. The black-clad Dixian said, "Prepare for the next match." So they prepared for the next match. Ravenous Wolf against Quan Zohua. It seemed that the strength gap between the two sides was unprecedentedly huge. Ravenous Wolf was the most powerful of the 4 Dixian players, but Quan Zohua was obviously the weakest link in the Wanxian League camp. Her strength, wisdom, and reputation were far worse than the others. The only specialty she could bring out was her sweet singing, but this specialty had nothing to do with fighting. Sending her on the field, no matter how you looked at it, it was like directly giving up on this match. However, after experiencing the first 2 battles, no one dared to underestimate Wang Lu's arrangement. Even if it was a stupid dog, after being released by Wang Lu's hands, it was difficult to guarantee that it wouldn't bite people to death. After Quan Zohua entered the field, she didn't immediately change into her original form, but looked around curiously in the posture of a girl, seemingly full of curiosity about the central arena of Immortal One area. But soon her attention was attracted by Ravenous Wolf. Looking at the notorious opponent, Quan Zohua snorted. The girl's slightly naive voice spat out rough and straightforward words. "Wang Lu. You said before that as long as I get rid of this guy, Xiao Bai will belong to me, right?" In the audience, Wang Lu laughed. "Yes, as long as you can get rid of him, I will help you ask Bai Shixian to have sex with me." "Really? If you dare to do that to me, I will bite you to death." Wang Lu said lightly, "If you dare to bite me, Xiao Bai will never talk to you again in this life." "Damn, Wang Lu, you are too despicable." "Really? Then go ask someone else for help." How could Xiao Bai like you?" Just as the man and the dog began to quarrel with each other, Ravenous Wolf still maintained his half-ethereal, half-real ghost body, silent, his eyes constantly sizing up the other party, and then gradually showed a greedy look. "Good thing, really good thing, you are mine." His name was Ravenous Wolf, and just like his name, his biggest characteristic was his greed. He was greedy for everything, greedy at any time. Gluttonous, fond of delicious food, lustful, fond of beautiful women, greedy for money, and good treasures. And the Quan Zohua before him was undoubtedly a target worthy of his full greed. Western continent monster wolf was a top-rank mythological beast from another continent. Its flesh and blood essence was undoubtedly the world's top food ingredient. The sweet taste drifted into his nose with the wind, making Ravenous Wolf's appetite greatly aroused. In addition, although the girl before him was not as blatant as Lu Li, nor as cold and flawless as Zhu Shiyao, she was also elegant and beautiful. Her pair of smooth and slender legs extended down along the soul-stirring curve of her waist and buttocks, which was particularly seductive. Moreover, this kind of Western continent monster wolf, who had already taken human form, was priceless no matter where it was. Ravenous Wolf believed that even if the price reached an immortal treasure, there would still be people willing to trade for it. No matter what, this Quan Zohua was a target that could not be missed. Therefore, at this moment, Ravenous Wolf had made up his mind to take the opponent into his pocket. Of course, this was not easy. The previous Little Poison Immortal and Shuero too were also very greedy, especially Little Poison Immortal. At the beginning of the match, he declared that he wanted to refine Lu Li's body into a poison sac and refine her primordial spirit into a poison concubine. As a result, he died the most miserably. Shuero too was a bit better, but he still couldn't let go of the opponent's flesh and blood. As a result, he was pierced in the forehead by a sword. Were it not for his quick response, he would also have died. Ravenous Wolf didn't want to die, because among his many greed, the greed to live was also the first. Therefore, he remained calm and collected, just silently waited for Quan Zohua and Wang Lu to finish their quarrel, and then turned around with a blushing face. "Hey, you, wash your neck and wait for death." Then the girl pounced on him. In mid-air, she grinned, revealing a pair of sharp and bright little canine teeth. Ravenous Wolf was not careless. In the face of this reckless and unplanned attack, he resolutely chose to retreat. He had the physique of a ghost. With just a thought, his figure flashed several miles away. But after flashing, Ravenous Wolf was surprised to find that those cute little canine teeth were still not far in front of him. Ravenous Wolf flashed again, flashing 30 times in a row. Each time, he moved over 10 miles, and each time, it happened in the blink of an eye. Because of his movements, the arena space had expanded to a radius of 500 miles. But it still seemed to be somewhat insufficient. But after flashing 30 times, Ravenous Wolf was still facing that pair of little canine teeth that caused one to sigh. Quan Zouhua's seemingly casual attack was actually like a maggot in a tarsal bone, unable to be shaken off. This was far from what Ravenous Wolf had originally expected. He didn't want to seize the initiative at the start, but he also didn't want to lose the initiative at the start. Right now, it was as if he was being fiercely chased and beaten, unable to fight back. So he finally stopped flashing. Instead, his body turned from illusory to solid, and then he punched out with a heavy and powerful fist. Ravenous Wolf's fist was heavier than anyone had imagined. Because halfway through, his fist had already become as large as a mountain. Outside the arena, countless people cried out in disbelief, because very few people could make their bodies so large at the King Pill realm. But of course, Ravenous Wolf was different. His greatest trump card was not the insidious curse that many people guessed, nor was it a silent assassination, but the strength of his body. He was gluttonous, and when his craving flared up, he wanted to eat continuously for a year, so he needed a large stomach. He was lustful, and he wished that he could take in all the beauties in the world. Of course, this required a pair of sharp eyes. He was lustful, and in his absurdity, he had gathered 100,000 beauties together to enjoy himself. With so many beauties, it was clear that he couldn't just have one golden cudgel. So much greed had resulted in so much demand, and to fuse so much meat into a single body, it went without saying that the strength of the body was self-evident. Ravenous Wolf was also not a natural demon. He had reincarnated into a slaughtering demon, and what he valued was the unlimited growth of a demon's body, and the results did not disappoint him. The half-illusory, half-real ghost body was only a disguise. If he revealed his true body, even if it was only at the King Pill level, it would be enough to shock everyone. Now, Ravenous Wolf had only released a fist, and it was like releasing a mountain. This was the most direct and violent method, but it was enough to make most King Pill cultivators wet their pants. A top King Pill sword cultivator could split a mountain with one sword, but if a mountain was really smashed down, not many could withstand it. Quan Zouhua didn't seem particularly strong among those at the King Pill level. Except for that sneak attack just now, there was nothing special about it. So after this punch, at least one of her 2 small canine teeth would break. But the next moment, Ravenous Wolf felt a sharp pain in his fist. When he hurriedly retracted it, he saw that only half a mountain remained. Quan Zouhua's small canine teeth were still sharp, but there was a trace of blood on them. Chapter 679. Ravenous Wolf hadn't been in such pain for a long time. The physical pain was not painful, because the body had been strengthened to the extreme. Not only would it have a super huge size, strong defense, but it would also have enough resilience. With the strength of Ravenous Wolf's body, even if he was dismembered by 5 horses, he could quickly recover. Half of his fist that was bitten off would quickly regenerate in 1 or 2 breaths. However, Ravenous Wolf's pain was heartache. No miser is happy to see his property taken away by others. This powerful physical body was Ravenous Wolf's greatest reliance, as well as his most valuable asset. Ravenous Wolf had spent countless painstaking efforts to build it. Not even a hair could be allowed to be taken away, let alone half of his hand. The more greedy a person was, the more difficult it was to tolerate their wealth being robbed. Seeing Quan Zouhua licking her lips with her small tongue and tasting the taste of flesh and blood, deep in Ravenous Wolf's painful heart, anger began to surge. If it was taken away, it must be taken back twice as much. However, anger did not destroy his reason. On the contrary, Ravenous Wolf became more rational and cautious in his anger. Thus, he soon realized a problem. How did Quan Zhuhua do it? Although what Ravenous Wolf released just now was only a small part of his physical body, it was already an incredible behemoth in the Jindan realm. In terms of size alone, it was like a small mountain. Not to mention that Ravenous Wolf's body had been tempered thousands of times. His internal strength was far stronger than ordinary steel. Why didn't that pair of fangs break? Moreover, after swallowing half of a mountain, why didn't she have indigestion? If it was an ordinary swallowing method, her stomach would have burst. Western continent monster Wolf Fenrir, Ravenous Wolf's angry eyes became more and more gloomy. That idiot actually dared to sacrifice his body in front of the stupid dog. Hasn't he heard the joke of using meat bun to hit a dog? Or is he expecting the stupid dog to have indigestion? In the audience stand, Wang Lu couldn't help but laugh. Never question Fenrir's appetite. This had long been a no-nonsense rule in Spirit Sword Mountain. Although she didn't eat much when she was on the mountain, that was only because she didn't want to eat too much. If she ate too much, she would be scolded by Bai Shixian for wasting food. However, if Fenrir really raised her appetite, the granary on Spirit Sword Mountain that could feed hundreds of cultivators for decades could not stand her 2 or 3 mouthfuls. Western continent monster Wolf Fenrir was a top-level magical beast that could swallow the heaven and earth. In the Legend of 9 Regions, the howling celestial dog that could swallow the moon was actually inferior to it. The appetite of this kind of top-level existence has reached an unimaginable level. Even the 2 girls of the Spirit Sword Mountain, who had the honorary title of Big Stomach King, could never compete with the appetite of the demonic Wolf Fenrir. Were it not for the fact that she completely didn't know how to taste the food and just gobbled it up, Aya and Luli wouldn't have had the chance to appear in the food competition. A mere mountain wanted to fill Fenrir's stomach? What a joke. Even if Ravenous Wolf revealed his true form and revealed his body that was comparable to that of a giant beast, Fenrir could still digest him. This punch that he was determined to win was simply delivering meat to his doorstep. Thinking to this, Wang Lu gently breathed out. It was indeed right to put Fenrir as the 3rd player. Before the match, he had looked for Supreme Tianluan to calculate the best order of appearance for the fight. However, after 3 calculations, the result was different. Obviously, in the case of interference from the other side, arithmetic alone could not give a reliable answer. Therefore, Wang Lu simply relied on himself and threw the dice 3 times to determine the order. Now it seemed that it was just right. At the same time, the fight in the arena gradually entered a white-hot stage. Ravenous Wolf calmly burned with anger, then he took a deep breath and opened his mouth, revealing 2 rows of sharp teeth that gleamed with cold light. He was a slaughtering devil, but he was reincarnated step by step from the human race. His natural physical magical ability was far less than that of a magical beast, but his acquired growth potential was infinite. He was Dixian, and when he became famous, he had once killed an immortal beast. Thus, the magical ability of a mere Western continent monster wolf was not enough to discourage him. On the contrary, it inspired his fighting spirit. Even if it was just a competition of swallowing, he never thought that he would lose. After all, the Western continent monster wolf swallowing the world was only a legend, but he had actually swallowed a part of the world, and that part of the world was still in his stomach. As long as he could swallow and digest this Western continent monster wolf, his immortal path was likely to usher in perfection. A black hole-like whirlpool slowly stirred in Ravenous Wolf's throat, pulling everything around it. Seeing this, Quan Zhuhua looked quite surprised. Yo, opening your mouth so big, do you want to compete with me in swallowing? You should know who I am, right? Quan Zhuhua widened her eyes and asked incredulously, Wang Lu, what kind of bird did you arrange for me to be my opponent? If I win against this kind of idiot, I have no face at all. Little Bai will not fall in love with me because of my valiant and heroic appearance. In the audience stand, Wang Lu's voice passed through the shield of the arena. Then why don't I give you a super powerful opponent next time, one that can smash you into pieces with one slap, and let Little White see your shining white brain matter and fall deeply in love with you, unable to extricate herself. That's why I said it's best to find you a moronic opponent. You still dare to complain, don't you know that little Bai is also watching the whole process? If you talk too much nonsense, be careful, I won't be able to help you after the competition. Quan Zhuhua immediately shut up and then turned her attention back to Ravenous Wolf. For this opponent that other people were incomparably afraid of, Quan Zhuhua didn't think there was anything great about it. Because her intuition told her that the opponent seemed strong, but the real card was completely restrained by her, so there was nothing to be afraid of. If it were the previous two guys, she would have to consider whether her shining white brain was really that good-looking or not. Now, as long as she used her best and favorite way to make a scene, the final victory would definitely belong to her, and she and Little Bai could fly together forever. Thereupon, with an earth-shaking howl, the girl revealed her true body of a monster wolf and fiercely pounced on Ravenous Wolf. This was exactly what Ravenous Wolf wanted. He also opened his 2 rows of sharp teeth and greeted her with the cold light. The next moment, blood splattered. The fighting style of Fenrir and Ravenous Wolf was completely different from the previous 2 fights against Little Poison Immortal and Shuero Tuesday. There was no unparalleled sword chi, no magical ability, only the most primitive, beast-like biting and swallowing. You bite me, I bite you, sharp teeth, flesh and blood splattered. Ravenous Wolf did not completely release his physical body, because in a situation where his opponent could swallow half a mountain in one gulp, an overly large physical body would only be a burden. He turned himself into a ferocious beast of the same size as his opponent and began a bloody slaughter. In such a fight, all calculations and wisdom had lost their meaning. Only the most instinctive and wild things could persist to the end. Ravenous Wolf was cautious by nature, but in the fight, he completely unlocked his shackles and attacked in a nearly crazy manner to bring oppression to the opponent. And this soon had an effect. Fenrir's swallowing ability was almost limitless, but after all, she only had 1 mouth and 2 rows of teeth. When Ravenous Wolf attacked with one hand, she could bite off half of the opponent's hand, but what if the opponent attacked with both fists? Fenrir had no other way but to use her physical body to take it. At this time, Ravenous Wolf would seize the opportunity and bite her without hesitation. After 2 or 3 rounds of fighting, she lost her left forearm and a piece of soft flesh on her abdomen, and a terrible wound appeared on her right thigh. Of course, her harvest was equally rich. Ravenous Wolf lost his 2 arms and half of his face. However, Ravenous Wolf gradually showed a victorious smile, because his body could quickly recover and regenerate, but Fenrir couldn't. In the biting just now, Ravenous Wolf seemed to have lost more, but he was 1 step closer to victory. For him, swallowing was never a one-off thing, but a test of endurance and perseverance. Sure enough, after a few more rounds of biting, Ravenous Wolf lost his arms again, and even his abdomen was bitten open, and half of his internal organs were swallowed. But he quickly recovered, while Fenrir couldn't even stop the bleeding from her wounds. She also lost her 2 feet, so she couldn't stand steadily and looked extremely weak. Ravenous Wolf attacked again, unreservedly releasing a mountain-like fist. Fenrir had no choice but to open her mouth to block. However, Ravenous Wolf took this opportunity to tear off a piece of flesh from Fenrir's neck, almost biting her throat. Fenrir turned around to fight back, but was forced to block by Ravenous Wolf's other hand. Ravenous Wolf took this opportunity to bite off another leg of Fenrir. At this point, Fenrir lost 3 of her 4 legs, and lost a lot of blood. Finally, she couldn't continue and fell down. Ravenous Wolf looked at his opponent condescendingly, and then, without any hesitation, he opened his mouth and bit down. He wanted to finish his harvest before Wang Lu surrendered for his teammate. Everything you have will belong to me. As he thought so, his 2 rows of sharp teeth aimed at Fenrir's throat and bit down. Clang! Ravenous Wolf felt a sharp pain in his mouth, followed by the sound of hard objects breaking. More than half of his 2 rows of sword-like teeth were broken. What kind of life-saving prop is this? It doesn't matter, this kind of prop has a limited number of times, I will do it again. So Ravenous Wolf quickly regenerated his 2 rows of sharp teeth, and once again aimed at Fenrir's throat and bit down. This time, his teeth didn't break, but Ravenous Wolf clearly felt that his opponent's neck seemed to be countless times tougher. He bit with all his strength, but he could only make his teeth slightly sink into the opponent's flesh, completely unable to cause any damage, let alone bite off her throat and kill her in one blow. What's going on? Ravenous Wolf was puzzled, but he didn't have too much time to think about the reason, because the weak Fenrir had turned her head at this time, gently opened her mouth, and aimed at Ravenous Wolf's throat. At this time, Fenrir was already an arrow at the end of its flight, and this last blow was extremely reluctant, but considering her lethality, Ravenous Wolf didn't want to take the risk for nothing, so he intended to withdraw and temporarily avoid the attack. However, after the idea arose, he found that his body was not listening to him, and his reaction speed was incredibly slow. Seeing Fenrir's last blow getting closer and closer, Ravenous Wolf was burning with anxiety. Move, move for me. Unfortunately, the countless roars in his heart couldn't change the reality at all. Not only did his body not move, but it also became weaker. Ravenous Wolf only saw a wolf's mouth rapidly expanding in front of him, squeezing his entire field of vision, and he could barely maintain his standing posture. He was completely exhausted. It turned out to be like this. At the last moment, Ravenous Wolf finally realized something. Fenrir's devouring ability was beyond his imagination. Not only could she devour his body, but she could also devour his existence. In the previous biting attack, he seemed to have the upper hand. Every time his body was devoured, he could quickly regenerate it, but in fact, the strength of his body was constantly declining, because his existence was constantly being diluted. When Ravenous Wolf realized this, he had already lost too much, and there was nothing he could do to reverse the situation. This was an almost perfect trap, but there was still a flaw in it. So, it seems that I still won this game. Thinking of this, Ravenous Wolf smiled slightly. Do you want to eat? Then eat it, be careful of indigestion. The next moment, his world fell into absolute darkness. Chapter 680. Kacha. 2 rows of sharp teeth fiercely closed, making a crisp impact sound, and a fountain of blood and minced meat splashed out from the gap of the teeth. Outside the arena, thousands of spectators saw this scene. The dying Fenrir bit off most of Ravenous Wolf's body, from his head to his lower abdomen, leaving only his 2 legs. He stood upright for a moment and then fell down. This bite was so fierce that it made countless people's hearts tremble. Then, Ravenous Wolf was unable to recover from his serious injury as quickly as before. The 2 limbs that fell to the ground just lay there. Ravenous Wolf neither released his huge body nor turned his body into a ghost, letting the blood flow. For Ravenous Wolf, every bit of flesh and blood was extremely precious. At this time, he was really extravagant, which was completely inconsistent with his miser nature. It was hard to imagine that he would do such a thing. In fact, Ravenous Wolf certainly couldn't do such a thing because he was dead. The 2 cores of the demon race had disappeared at the same time, and they had fallen into the belly of Fenrir. Even a great principal golden immortal couldn't do anything about it. It was just that, long after Ravenous Wolf's death, the audience couldn't come back to their senses. Why did Ravenous Wolf die? At the last moment, Fenrir's counterattack was ridiculously slow. Even a small shoot-on-stage cultivator could easily avoid it. However, Ravenous Wolf didn't avoid it. His performance was even slower than Fenrir's. He watched helplessly as the opponent took his life, which was like committing suicide. Ravenous Wolf, who was greedy for life, would certainly not commit suicide, so this was, of course, Fenrir's wonderful means. So, in short, Fenrir won this game. After thinking about this, the audience outside the arena no longer had time to be surprised and began to cheer and celebrate the victory. We actually won. With the addition of Daoist Master Nanfei's, our score in the King Pill level duel is already 3-1. Before the start of the match, Wang Lu said that he didn't have to fight in person, but in the end, he really didn't have to fight in person. Lingjian's school is too powerful. Not to mention that pair of Nanfei's master and disciple, even their dog is so sharp. More importantly, in these 3 matches, 2 Dixian people were killed and 1 was seriously injured. I'm afraid they won't have the courage to be so arrogant in the next match. In order to celebrate, I'm going back today to have sex with 10 women. Holy sh*t, how could you change the topic so quickly? For a moment, the audience was immersed in a sea of joy. The outcome of this match was extremely important. However, Wang Lu, who was in the audience, had a complicated expression on his face. TSK, I didn't expect to miscalculate in the end. I underestimated that stupid dog's digestive ability. There's no other way, looks like I have to do it myself. The moment these words were spoken, the red-robed patriarch was instantly stunned. Wang Lu, why do you make it sound like you've lost? Didn't you win beautifully? Wang Lu shook his head. Ancestor, why do you always misunderstand? The match just now was truly regrettable. Although we killed him, we lost the match. The red-robed patriarch was shocked. How did I lose? At this moment, even the Dixian couldn't figure out what was going on. They stared at the scene in bewilderment. Wang Lu said he lost? How did I lose? The situation in the field had clearly been settled. That Western continent demonic wolf was now gnawing the bones of Ravenous Wolf, and its injuries were slowly recovering. Although it was a bit tragic, it was much better than Ravenous Wolf's body being completely destroyed. That demonic wolf has broken the realm. Finally, a sharp Dixian revealed the answer. The moment before she killed Ravenous Wolf, she broke through the peak of King Pill and entered the Yuanying stage. This violated the rules of King Pill level battle, so she was automatically judged to have lost. This is actually the reason. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu nodded and explained, Hua is a Western continent demonic wolf, so the difference between the stages is not as obvious as that of ordinary human cultivators. However, the difference between King Pill and Yuanying stage still exists. In order to ensure the winning rate before the match, I let her raise her power to infinitely close to Yuanying stage, and then suppressed her with 13 layers of beast trap seal to prevent her from breaking the realm. In addition, Western continent demonic wolf's control of power is very strong, so it should be foolproof. However, I also underestimated the level of Ravenous Wolf's body and Huahua's digestive ability. After swallowing a few pieces of Ravenous Wolf's body, the digested energy actually allowed Huahua to break through the 13 layers of beast trap seal in one go, forcing her to directly advance to Yuanying stage. That's really amazing. After Wang Lu's explanation, people felt speechless. The audience, who were originally in ecstasy, gradually cooled down, and their hearts were incomparably tangled. From King Pill to Yuanying stage, many Daoist masters of King Pill felt powerless and powerless. For tens of thousands of years, there were countless cultivators who died in front of this stage, among which, the most famous one was undoubtedly the number 1 King Pill in 9 regions. Even if it was a cultivator with excellent aptitude, an unprecedented cultivator, when breaking through from King Pill to Yuanying stage, they had to be careful, and only after sufficient preparation could they break through in one fell swoop. As a result, when it came to Fenrir, she actually had to use the 13 layers of beast trap seal of Beast Master School to suppress her from breaking the realm? Perhaps, this was not only related to the powerful bloodline of Fenrir, but more importantly, the strength of Ravenous Wolf's body was far beyond imagination. After Quan Zohua digested it, the energy obtained had been so abundant that even the beast trap seal could not suppress it. If it were anyone else, perhaps they would have exploded and died because of this abundant energy. However, Western continent demonic wolf was simply a top-level magical beast that was born to devour, so she just happened to be able to withstand it. If it weren't for the magical ability of Fenrir's bloodline that restrained the opponent, Ravenous Wolf would not have fallen into such a miserable situation. His physical strength had reached the level where he could beat 10 people with brute force. In a head-on confrontation, perhaps only the number 1 King Pill in 9 regions could win against him in the King Pill stage. However, under the circumstance that Wang Wu had already appeared on the stage, it was admirable that she was able to achieve such a result. Unfortunately, the strength gap was still too big. Although Quan Zohua killed her opponent, she lost the match. But who could blame her for this situation? Especially after the girl returned to her human form, her miserable condition was simply unbearable to look straight at. Hey, Wang Lu, I won. The wolf girl, who walked from the arena to the audience seat, reluctantly showed a smile. However, her delicate smiling face was stained with blood, especially on her forehead, which had several long and deep bloodstains that extended all the way to her cheeks, completely destroying the beauty of her face. The girl's 2 arms were broken at the elbows, and the flesh of her right thigh was almost gnawed away, revealing the pale leg bone. Hee hee, cool, right? Quan Zouhua laughed. At this time, even Wang Lu couldn't say anything to reprimand her. He just silently shook his head and took out the healing medicine that he had prepared earlier from his bosom. However, before Wang Lu handed over the medicine, an elder from Heavenly Sage Hall of the Wanxian League had already stood up from the audience seat. It was the sect leader from Yin and Yang School, a beautiful woman who looked to be in her early 20s. It's really outrageous. How could you let such a beautiful girl be beaten like this? Wang Lu, in order to win, you are too unscrupulous. Wang Lu cupped his hands across his chest and accepted all the criticism. Because when the other party spoke, she had already put a red pill into Quan Zouhua's mouth. The woman's action was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the pill turned into a liquid that flowed into Quan Zouhua's body, giving her no time to react. However, soon, a mass of warmth flowed through her abdomen, which quickly healed the scars in the battle. Her broken arm was regenerated at a speed visible to the naked eye, and countless granulation wrapped around the bones, squirming and growing. It seemed that in less than a cup of tea's time, the girl's serious injury could be completely healed. Thank you for the pill, sect leader. The sect leader of Yin and Yang School glared at Wang Lu and said, "What's there to thank? Do you think only your Lingjian school understands the overall situation and contributes to the grand competition? Ha ha ha, I think senior is too narrow-minded." Wang Lu shook his head and said to Quan Zouhua, "Go down and rest. Don't worry about little Bai. Even if I have to drug her, I will fulfill your wishful thinking." Unexpectedly, Quan Zouhua shook her head seriously and said, "I not only want little Bai's body, but also her heart." "No problem. As the saying goes, it's the esophagus that enters a man's heart, and it's the sound that enters a woman's heart. As long as you have a big tool, there's no woman's heart that you can't grasp. And it just so happens that the sect leader in front of you is the best at this, so you can ask for more advice." Quan Zouhua immediately opened her eyes wide with excitement and limped around the sect leader of Yin and Yang School. "Really? Senior sect leader, please give me your advice." The sect leader of Yin and Yang School fiercely glared at Wang Lu, but was soon disturbed by the dog-like enthusiasm of the girl. When Wang Lu was about to continue to add fuel to the fire, he heard a cold hump from Dixian's side. "Have you told enough boring jokes?" Burning Lamp Girl's eyes were like flames as she coldly said, "Don't you forget that there's still a 5th match? You've been playing the fool on the stage, delaying enough time. Isn't it time for you to come down?" "Ha ha ha, previously I said you're stupid, but you don't admit it. Think about it clearly, who needs to delay time now? Is it the stupid dog that almost killed you, or is it that Biyao, who has long been punished by my master and turned into a jumping clown in my hands? I'm trying to buy time for you, so that you can be more prepared, so that when you die, it's too late to regret." "You!" Burning Lamp Girl bristled with anger, but she had to admit that Wang Lu's confusing words, which were based on the results of the previous 3 matches, were quite convincing. She, of course, knew that Wang Lu was delaying time in order to speed up the healing of Lu Li's injury in the first match. However, the other party didn't admit it, so she couldn't refute it. Burning Lamp Girl was, after all, not good at quarreling like Dixian. Enough, no need to talk nonsense. Let the 5th match begin. Along with the words of the black-clad Dixian, Wang Lu's figure suddenly disappeared from the audience, and the next moment, he appeared in the middle of the arena. And there, Dixian Biyao had been waiting for a long time. Chapter 681. When they saw Biyao, the audience outside the arena breathed a sigh of relief. Although the fight had not yet begun, people seemed to have predicted the result. Compared with the previous 3 evil stars, Bai Zai's deterrence was much smaller. On the contrary, Wang Lu's prestige was much stronger than that of the previous few people combined. The strength and weakness were so obvious that the result was, of course, no doubt. Even in Area A and B, some busybodies had begun to set off fireworks and firecrackers in advance to celebrate the victory in advance. However, people with discerning eyes knew that for the Wanxian League, the difficulty of this round was probably higher than the previous 3. From the point of view of Wang Lu, although he had won a high reputation in the grand competition, it did not mean that his strength could far surpass that of the previous 3. Especially in the first round, after Lu Li obtained invincible defense with the help of same body insect, her attack and defense attributes could be said to be invincible among the same level. Her actual fighting power definitely surpassed that of Wang Lu himself. In fact, in the first 3 fights, Lu Li, Zhu Shiyao, and Quan Zouhua were not really fighting alone in the true sense. Wang Lu played a great role in it. Now that it was Wang Lu's turn to fight, who could support him? In fact, there was no one. Although many people had the intention to help him, it was really difficult to help. As for Dixian Bai Zai, he used to be the number 2 figure in the Dixian camp. Although this status was more due to the fact that he was the only one among the Dixian who dared to vote against the leader, not because of his strength. However, it was undeniable that he was indeed a first-class cultivator. His dismal record was because after the Dixian resuscitation, his opponents were Wang Wu and Wang Lu, the pair of master and disciple, not because his strength was really not good enough. If it were anyone else against Bai Zai, the result would be very different. Moreover, the black-clothed Dixian had placed Bai Zai in the last position, which showed his great trust in him. Only an idiot would dare to underestimate such an opponent. Of course, Wang Lu wasn't an idiot, so the moment he stepped down from the stage, he raised all his fighting spirit and turned it into a sincere smile. "Huh, we meet again. How have you been, little Bai?" Bai Zai naturally wouldn't pay attention to this frivolous provocation. He just silently released his own magical weapon, 3 golden seals. Wang Lu was shocked. After Bai Zai lost to Wang Wu, he learned from his painful experience and thought that his immortal artifact negation seal did not have much of an advantage in a king pill level battle, so he sealed it for a time. This time, he took out the negation seal once again, which really surprised everyone. "Oh, I didn't expect you to still use this thing. Did you upgrade it?" Wang Lu said and walked forward confidently, trying to catch the golden seal with his hand. Bai Zai sneered. "Won't you know if you try?" A seal smashed over. Wang Lu flipped his wrist and avoided the edge. He approached the golden seal from the side, still trying to catch it with his hand. But Bai Zai's golden seal changed direction very quickly, like a stream of light, drawing an arc and circling behind Wang Lu. Wang Lu blocked with his left hand. His 5 fingers formed a seal and condensed an invisible shield in front of him. However, when the golden seal collided with the shield, it was like a hot knife through butter. It was unstoppable and fell on Wang Lu's left palm. The next moment, Wang Lu's left hand turned gray from the elbow and disappeared without a trace like an illusion. But at the same time, Wang Lu took a step forward, and a mirror image appeared behind him. The injury on his left forearm was left in the illusion. But when Wang Lu took a step forward, he saw 2 dazzling golden lights in front of him. It was the other 2 negation golden seals flying toward him. Even at this time, he still didn't draw his sword. Instead, he welcomed it with his body. The 2 golden seals pierced through his chest without any hindrance, leaving 2 3-inch square holes. They cut Wang Lu in half at the waist and turned him into a corpse. The lower half fell to the ground and turned into gray mud, while the upper half soared into the sky. It suddenly extended in midair and turned into a complete human form. It really has upgraded. This is very targeted. Bai Zai snorted coldly and recalled the 3 golden seals. He frowned and didn't say anything. Just now, the rhythm of their attack and defense was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they had finished testing each other. Compared to the beginning, Bai Zai's negation seal's effect in actual combat was greatly improved because there were more than 10 times more ways to attack. The original negation seal was a kind of killing weapon that could involve cause and effect. It had no blind spots when attacking. Every time Bai Zai used it, he had to spend a lot of effort. Of course, its lethality was also unquestionable. However, in a battle at the King Pill level, although this kind of immortal treasure's lethality was unparalleled, it had flaws that could be found. It was very easy for people to take advantage of the loopholes to avoid it. For example, when he fought with Wang Wu for the first time, Wang Wu used the so-called backup pill to avoid the negation seal's erasure effect. At the same time, the flaw of the negation seal's relatively slow and cumbersome casting was still retained. It made the methods used in the battle seem monotonous, which was very uneconomical. As for the upgraded negation seal, its lethality was much weaker. Just now, when Wang Lu's arm was touched, it only destroyed his forearm. Afterwards, it was offset by Wang Lu's doppelganger. It was far from being as overbearing as the original negation seal. However, the new negation seal was more flexible and adaptable. If one attack failed, then it could launch continuous attacks. The effect of each negation seal was different. Some erased the body, some erased magic power. Of course, there were also some that specialized in destroying protective magic treasures. The effect of each negation seal could change at any time, making it impossible to guard against. Just now, Wang Lu seemed to have dodged it easily, but in fact, it was like walking on a steel wire high up in the sky. It was a matter of life and death. On the other hand, Bai Zai also didn't expect that his continuous attacks that went straight to the point would actually be completely ineffective. Just a few short months ago, he didn't have the ability to resist at all. He had to rely on a series of props and calculations to survive. But now, with only his own spell, he could do it with ease. His progress was simply jaw-dropping. What surprised him even more was that, in the face of such a sharp and intensive offensive, Wang Lu actually couldn't hold out his sword. It was as if he had seen through his own tactics. Among the 3 golden seals, one of them was specialized in breaking magical tools, which was reserved for rouge tears. Although Wang Lu's rouge tears was an immortal treasure, rouge tears came from the hands of Xian Mo. As a companion in the same camp, Bai Zai knew rouge tears like the back of his hand and could target it very strongly. At the same time, the spirit of rouge tears had recently supported Lu Li in battle, which consumed a lot of energy, which was also a flaw. These 2 flaws made Bai Zai confident that he could directly break them with the negation seal. Even if it couldn't cause permanent damage, it could still make Wang Lu have no sword to use in the whole fight. However, Wang Lu still refused to use his sword, which made Bai Zai unable to take advantage of this flaw. Instead, he had to be on guard against the moment he used his sword. Even if Wang Lu's attack ability was not as earth-shattering as Lu Li's and Zhu Shiyao's, sword demon Zhong Xingming's primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi was also famous in Dixian, so he didn't want to face it head-on. In that case, Bai Zai thought for a moment, stretched out his hand, and summoned out 3 golden seals. 6 golden seals, for him in the King Pill stage, was already a bit difficult, but he also firmly believed that in the face of 6 golden seals, the opposite party would never have any reservations. However, just as he was about to make his move, he saw Wang Lu's figure swayed and directly appeared in front of him. In the face of the negation seal, which had the effect of killing, Wang Lu actually didn't retreat but chose to fight close combat with Bai Zai. Bai Zai, of course, couldn't ask for more. He immediately turned the 6 golden seals to surround him. However, the next moment, Bai Zai's countenance changed. Because he found out that the Wang Lu in front of him was still just a substitute. Moreover, unlike the previous substitutes who offset the damage, this was a self-destructing substitute. That surging tide of fire attribute true elemental energy could erupt at any time, causing earth-shattering destruction. How could the sword cultivator who originally focused on swordsmanship become so cunning and quick-witted today? Bai Zai secretly cursed, but he didn't panic. He mobilized 5 golden seals to pursue Wang Lu's real body, and 1 continued to rush toward Wang Lu's substitute. The negation seal on the seal changed from body breaking to spell breaking. This was the difference between Dixian and ordinary cultivators. No matter how powerful your spells were, in the eyes of Dixian, it was still crude and not worth mentioning. Wang Lu's self-destructing substitute was enough to seriously injure any cultivator at the peak of King Pill, but Bai Zai only needed to use a spell-breaking golden seal to make this substitute disappear without a trace. The next moment, the golden seal fell, and the surging fire attribute true elemental energy instantly disappeared. But what surprised Bai Zai was that Wang Lu's figure was still in front of him. This wasn't a substitute. In the blink of an eye, Bai Zai realized Wang Lu's trick. He concentrated a large amount of fire attribute true elemental energy and didn't conceal it, disguised his real body as a substitute, and openly approached. On the other hand, he had scattered the precious golden seals to search for the non-existent true body. It wasn't a complicated tactic, but Bai Zai really didn't expect Wang Lu to do this. Because Wang Lu's specialty should be the sword Dao. In this kind of life and death battle, he didn't use his specialty, but could it be that he had to use acrobatics? In the end, Wang Lu really did the opposite and took the initiative with acrobatics. Even if the next moment, the 5 golden seals could crush him to pieces, at least at this moment, the initiative was indeed in the hands of Wang Lu. In a battle with a sword cultivator, the most taboo was to let the opponent get close. And Wang Lu was undoubtedly the top sword cultivator in the King Pill realm. At this moment, time seemed to slow down for Bai Zai. In his line of sight, a primal chaos sword chi that made the space tremble faintly condensed in front of him. He didn't know whether Wang Lu's full power outbreak could hurt him. He now had the heavenly devil body, and as long as the 2 vital points were not destroyed at the same time, he could continue to regenerate, but the killing power of the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi was also repeatedly beyond common sense. However, Bai Zai didn't need to worry about this. Because the 7th golden seal had been waiting in his hands for a long time. The golden seal that specialized in breaking the world's sword chi was enough to make any sword chi disappear. Wang Lu's acrobatics was indeed surprising, but how could this kind of life and death battle be decided by acrobatics? Chapter 682. The fight between Wang Lu and Bai Zai went very fast. In just a few breaths of time, the two had completed several rounds of attack and defense exchange, which dazzled the audience outside the arena. It was fine for cultivators above Yuanying stage, but for cultivators below King Pill stage, they only felt a blur in front of their eyes, and then they could no longer see the two people. What's going on here? Although the pace of the previous 3 matches was quite fast, it was common for the peak-level confrontation of King Pill stage to last for several days and nights. However, for Lu Li and the others, victory and defeat were decided in just a few rounds, and even life and death were decided. But even for them, the pace would not be as fast as Wang Lu against Bai Zai, which was so fast that people couldn't even react. This was undoubtedly somewhat disappointing, because in the eyes of most of the ignorant audience, Wang Lu's personal appearance meant that the victory was already set, so they just needed to enjoy the process. But now that the process was so fast that they couldn't enjoy it, how could they not be disappointed? Of course, the audience couldn't understand that if something needed Wang Lu's personal appearance, it often meant a big trouble. However, just as people began to complain, the pace in the arena finally slowed down. After a dazzling exchange of attack and defense, Wang Lu and Bai Zai suddenly stopped and nailed to the spot. Bai Zai's 7 golden seals fell on Wang Lu's body at the same time. The scene of the 7 seals falling together was shocking, but it didn't leave any terrible wound. As for Wang Lu, he put his hand on Bai Zai's chest, which looked a bit soft and powerless. No one knew what exactly he did. The audience was puzzled by the 2 men's action. Even the elders of Heavenly Sage Hall couldn't help but lean forward, as if they could see it more clearly. Is this a draw? An elder tried to guess. It doesn't look like it. Wang Lu's face is calmer than the opposite side. I think that for Wang Lu, even if he loses, he will be able to face it calmly. Judging the outcome by his expression is too arbitrary. To these elders, who were at least at the deity transformation stage, it was an unprecedented and novel experience for them to watch a king pill-level battle by observing the expressions of both parties. But whether it was Bai Zhe or Wang Lu, they were both far beyond common sense. Just as the audience was discussing among themselves, the two people in the arena finally spoke. "Despicable and shameless," Bai Zhe said through gritted teeth. Hearing this, many people secretly heaved a sigh of relief, because it seemed that Bai Zhe had suffered a loss. As for the despicable and shameless accusations, for those who liked Wang Lu, it was just a passing breeze. However, in the next moment, everyone was on tenterhooks. For this victory, you don't even want your own life. What are you thinking? As he spoke, Bai Zhe straightened his body and waved his hand to retrieve all the 7 golden seals. Then, he shook his head forcefully, looking like a victor who was angry at his enemy for not fighting. Then, he reached out and touched his chest. With a flick of his wrist, his fingers picked up a fat silkworm the size of a thumb. The silkworm was completely golden, and it kept twisting in Bai Zhe's fingertips. Bai Zhe stared at this golden silkworm seriously, then raised his head and asked Wang Lu, "What is this?" Wang Lu smiled. "Golden silkworm goo." Golden silkworm goo? It's a powerful tool that seizes the fortune of heaven and earth to break through to the nascent soul level from the king pill. Doesn't it feel good? Hearing this, the audience suddenly came to a realization. So this was what Bai Zhe was referring to when he said despicable and shameless. With a strange insect called golden silkworm goo, he forcibly pushed Bai Zhe's stage to Yuanying stage, making him violate the rules and take the initiative to lose. Of course, no one had ever heard of the golden silkworm goo that could absolutely make a person break through to the next stage. Moreover, they were sure that before today, the golden silkworm goo had never appeared in 9 regions. However, since it was Wang Lu, then it was not surprising that he could come up with something. Thinking of the last fight, Quan Zhuhua lost the match because she absorbed too much energy while killing her opponent. It was really the cycle of heaven and retribution. On the other hand, in order to send this golden silkworm goo into Bai Zhe's body, Wang Lu was hit by the 7 golden seals at the same time. Was this okay? However, seeing that the two people on the stage didn't care about this issue, Bai Zhe coldly asked, "Is this golden silkworm goo the work of that witch doctor?" Wang Lu nodded his head and said, "Although a Wu stage is not high, she's the best witch doctor in the 9 regions." Bai Zhe also nodded his head and said, "The Great Desolate Era is indeed a great magical ability. Unfortunately, it's extinct in the Great Desolate Era. After all, it's a crooked way. If you rely too much on this kind of thing, even if you get a few points by luck, you will not be able to convince the public, let alone let you go far." The next moment, Bai Zhe's finger swallowed and spat out true yuan, which immediately wiped out the golden silkworm. "You win this match," Bai Zhe said, "but how long can you celebrate this victory?" Wang Lu said, "Yes, I'm dead, you can slowly celebrate." With that, Wang Lu's figure, like a grand firework, exploded with a loud bang and turned into pieces of golden rainbow. At this moment, millions of spectators were stunned. This situation was really unexpected to anyone. Seeing the end of the fight, all the contestants were ejected out of the arena, and the terrain in the arena quickly changed, returning to the default state. However, people still felt that their minds were blank. Was this the end of the fight? Wang Lu won and then died? Wang Lu died? The golden powder that exploded just now seemed to linger in front of their eyes. People saw with their own eyes that Wang Lu was hit by the 7 golden seals at the same time. Even Wang Lu could not withstand the immortal treasure that condensed the path of negation at will. She had to use a substitute spell to offset the damage. No matter how strong Wang Lu was, could he be stronger than his master? After being hit by the concentrated fire, wasn't this the normal result? However, why did Wang Lu get hit by the concentrated fire? Judging from the nimbleness and agility he displayed at the start of the battle, even if he could not defeat the encirclement of the 7 golden seals, he would at least be able to hold on for a long time. Who knows when he would be able to find a flaw and send the golden silkworm into Bai Zhe's body. But he sacrificed himself so heroically as if he was going to die on purpose. At this moment, thinking back to what Bai Zai asked just now, people couldn't help but agree. For such a victory, he even sacrificed his own life. What on earth was Wang Lu thinking? Did he see that the situation in the Wanxian League was declining, so he planned to sacrifice himself to wake up the others? The problem was that the sacrifice was too big. Judging from the previous performance of the Wanxian League, there were many things that they couldn't do. Their subjective initiative had long been mobilized, and what was left was a problem of ability. Therefore, in this situation, it was better for everyone to fall asleep than to lose a awake Wang Lu. Just when people were flustered and felt at a loss about the future, they suddenly heard a sneer from the rostrum. This laughter was captured by the broadcasting equipment in the arena and spread through the thousands of signboards in the City of Immortals. Are you sure that the one who died is Wang Lu? He has neither non-phase sword nor primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi. Whether it's the fighting style or the spell used, it's very different from Wang Lu. Except for the face and the mouth, is there anything similar between him and Wang Lu? The one who spoke was not a cultivator from the Wanxian League, but a thin and scholarly old man from the Dixian camp. As soon as this remark came out, not to mention the people from the Wanxian League, even the Dixian camp was in an uproar. Bai Zai's face turned livid and he glared at him. What did you say? The old man didn't pay any attention to him and only stroked his beard. Same body goo, golden silkworm goo, and this fake 5-colored earth puppet. I didn't expect the black shaman tribe's bloodline to actually not be severed. When people heard this, they felt inexplicable. They knew the names of same body insect and golden silkworm insect, but what was 5-color earth puppet? What was the black shaman tribe? Unfortunately, the old man didn't explain too much. After saying these words and showing his sense of existence, he silently sat back like a stone sculpture, which made people want to run over and slap him. He didn't finish his words, and the most important thing was to keep people in suspense. If this wasn't asking for a slap, then what was it? However, based on the old man's words, it was not difficult for people to outline the outline of the truth. Just now, the one who fought against the Dixian Bai Zai was not Wang Lu himself, but a substitute called 5-color earth puppet. Because it was a substitute, Wang Lu's best non-phase sword and primal chaos sword chi were not really used. Instead, Wang Lu's 5-element spell, which was rarely used, was frequently used. And because it was an earth puppet, there was no burden in using it to perish together with the enemy. Then, a golden silkworm insect and a 5-color earth puppet easily won the game. After figuring this out, there was a burst of laughter inside and outside the Immortal One area. In the midst of the laughter, Bai Zai's face gradually turned from green to white, and then turned red. Because as the old man pointed out the truth, he also understood everything. Indeed, from the beginning, the opponent was basically full of flaws. As Wang Lu, he didn't use non-phase sword, didn't play his defensive advantage, and instead fought a mobile battle, which was simply unreasonable. And at the last moment, the primal chaos sword chi that he brewed, although it seemed to have both form and spirit, if one looked closely, it was not difficult to find that the speed of the sword chi was still a lot slower than the real primal chaos sword chi. These flaws, in retrospect, were simply ridiculous. However, he thought that the opponent was Wang Lu, so everything was possible. He turned a blind eye to the flaws and finally fell into a trap. This was simply an unprecedented shame. The opponent didn't even appear in person, but just used 2 props to easily cut him down. And his previous hard work, seriously modifying the negation seal of the immortal treasure, tailor-made tactics for the King Pill level battle, at this time, all seemed to have become a joke. Wang Lu. Come out. Don't hide like this. Isn't this the first battle you'll be participating in? Are you going to fool everyone with an earth puppet? As soon as Bai Zai's voice fell, Wang Lu's voice sounded. I'm sorry, I'm not using an earth puppet. After a pause, he said again. I'm using IQ. Chapter 683. A highly anticipated King Pill level fight came to an end amidst the laughter of countless people. The Wanxian League side had achieved a brilliant victory that exceeded anyone's expectations. Although in terms of the score, it was a narrow win of 3-2, except for the undoubted victory of the number 1 King Pil Wang Wu in 9 regions, the fight led by Wang Lu was actually just a draw of 2-2. However, the real victory was beyond the score. Lu Li not only won the first match, but also perfectly killed Little Poison Immortal, killing a slaughtering devil whose hands were stained with the blood of the Wanxian League cultivators. Although Zhu Shiyao failed to win the second match, she forced Shuoro too into a sorry state, like a clown. In the third match, Quan Zouhua was the most ferocious. She swallowed up the opponent's most powerful ravenous wolf and turned it into energy for her own growth. The Dixian side not only lost the score, but also lost the lives of 2 of their generals. It must be known that these Dixian side were all elite veterans who had experienced countless battles against the fallen immortals in the past. After waking up after 16,000 years of sleep, any one of them could turn the clouds and rain with one turn of the hand in 9 regions. But now, 2 of them were lost in this battle, an unprecedented loss. In contrast, the loss of face and IQ of Bai Zhe in the last fight was not so important. Therefore, after this battle, the Dixian camp was silent. The gloomy atmosphere spread among more than 100 people and lasted for a long time. This was the first time in the grand competition in the past few months. Because although there were more than 100 people in the Dixian camp, only a few of the main forces such as Xian Mo and Bai Zhe participated enthusiastically. Most of the rest chose to watch. They didn't care much about this grand competition. Therefore, when Wang Lu began to win in a row, they just regarded it as a joke, pointed it out, and then went back to their own business. Then, the news of the death of Little Poison Immortal and Ravenous Wolf came. Even those who didn't care about the grand competition at all could not help but turn their eyes at this time. What's the matter with you guys? Of course, the object of blame would not be the dead, but the survivors. Shuoro too was a slaughtering devil, so no one wanted to talk to him. Therefore, the object of blame would only be Bai Zhe and Mirage Boy. The illusionary child didn't have anything to say about his failure. He used an illusion technique to summarize the situation that day and threw down a sentence: whoever has the ability can go fight with that heretic. If you can win, I'll give my 1,000 illusionary immortal spirit to him. He then swaggered off. The grandeur of the defeated army was even bigger than the winner. However, when it came to Bai Zhe, there was really no way to avoid it. The opponent was not an outside path cultivator, and his strength was at the peak of Jindan's stage. So, as an Earth Immortal, especially as the deputy of the Earth Immortal camp, what reason did Bai Zhe have to lose? Your strength far surpasses your opponent, the immortal artifacts in your possession far surpass your opponent, and your combat experience far surpasses your opponent. On what basis exactly did you lose? At the end of the day, it could probably only be attributed to a problem of intelligence. However, the humiliation that a problem of intelligence could bring to a person was far greater than a gap in strength or a gap in magical equipment. Bai Zhe wasn't a vain person. However, when he returned to Dixian's camp in defeat and heard a wave of questioning and condemnation, it was impossible for him to say that he didn't have any thoughts. His immortal Tao was the Tao of negation. In the Dixian camp, he was specifically responsible for voicing out different opinions. Even the most prestigious leader of the past had been publicly slapped in the face by him many times if he made the slightest mistake. Now, it was his turn to make a mistake. Would Bai Zhe show mercy? The answer, of course, was no. Bai Zhe was ruthless to others, but he was equally ruthless to himself. With my abilities, I'm no longer suitable for any position in the camp. From now on, I'm just an ordinary member of the camp. This was the explanation that Bai Zhe gave to everyone, an explanation that surprised everyone. Everyone knew that Bai Zhe's position in the camp was second only to the former leader's elder brother. He was a well-deserved deputy in the camp. Even Black, whose words carried the most weight today, didn't have a high position as Bai Zhe in the past. And more importantly, Bai Zhe had a unique veto power in the camp. In short, when Bai Zhe thought that something was seriously infeasible, he could use his authority to forcibly veto it. Of course, because this authority was too important, the Dixian leader only gave him 3 chances. In the long struggle with the fallen immortals, Biyao used his authority twice. Each time, he overruled the order of the Dixian leader. One of them saved the lives of many people. The other time, the gain and loss couldn't be seen, but after all, it couldn't be counted as wrong. In fact, it was with those 2 successes that Biyao really established his position in the camp. And now, there was only one time left for that supreme authority. Although it was only one time, its significance was extraordinary. The veto power given to him by the leader could veto everything, including the life of the Dixian leader. In other words, if Biyao really didn't like a person, he could even kill him in one word. However, now Biyao took the initiative to give up this power. For this reason, many people secretly breathed a sigh of relief, because Biyao was really an unpleasant guy, and most of the people in the camp had a very bad relationship with him. Biyao, you don't have to be so impulsive. The opponent is Wang Lu. It's not a big deal to lose, however, at this time, Xian Mo, who was usually quite at odds with Biyao, was the first to stand up and try to retain him. However, Bizao's mind had been made up, and it was difficult to reverse it. He said, "It doesn't matter if I lose, but I can't shirk the responsibility for losing like this." After saying that, seeing that Xian Mo was still unwilling, Biyao also sighed. "I know that I've never been liked by others, and I've never respected boss as much as you guys do. You guys hate me and even hate me, but I don't care. But actually, I don't care. Even if you get angry out of humiliation and ignore boss last will and kill me directly, I won't care." It was the first time that Xian Mo heard Biyao speak like this, and he couldn't help but ask, "Then what do you care about?" "I care about right and wrong." Biyao said very seriously, "I'm a very slow person, and I can't learn boss's wisdom, and I can't learn you guys' slyness, so I can't care about too many things. I only care about right and wrong, and if it's wrong, I'll reject it." Xian Mo said patiently, "Isn't that good? The problem is, I can't tell right from wrong now." Bizao's voice was a bit bitter. "In that case, what's the use of me in the Dixian camp?" Xian Mo hurriedly said, "It's just a failure. What's more, the person who arranged the battle array is black. Even if you have to bear the responsibility, it's not your turn to bear all the responsibility, right? Boss has given you this important task, how can you just give it up?" Biyao was silent for a long time, looked at Xian Mo very seriously, and then said, "Boss is dead." When the Dixian camp fell into silence, on the other hand, the Wanxian League naturally rejoiced. It was not an exaggeration to describe this victory with gorgeous words, so people were too lazy to describe it too much. A carnival was staged in the City of Immortals. Since the start of the grand competition, the several months of repression were released at this moment. The ecstatic cultivators staged all kinds of absurd plays all over the City of Immortals. However, in the midst of the frenzy, there were also many people who always remained calm. For example, the chief planner of the Wanxian League, Wang Lu, who single-handedly directed the whole victory. The courtyard in Immortal 5 area was as quiet as ever. The breeze blew the green willows, and the paper fluttered, brushing away the noise outside the courtyard. Even the voices in the courtyard seemed soft and gentle. "Wang Lu, you're such a fool." A woman said helplessly, "For a victory, you don't even want your own life." "That's fine. After all, your little king pill's life is not valuable. The problem is that you should at least discuss with me about the golden silkworm insect, same body insect, and 5-color earth puppet." Wang Lu responded sarcastically, "After the discussion, you recommend me a special counterfeit that can achieve 80% of the effect of the original product, but only 1/10 of the cost." The woman confidently said, "From the point of view of cost-effectiveness, that's a wise choice." "That's true. That's why I dealt with the several immortal level props that you applied for the special training last time." The next moment, the woman's sharp voice cut through the quiet atmosphere of the courtyard. "Wang Lu, you bitch. Just you wait." After that, a green sword shadow flew out like a bolt of lightning. It was obvious that it was in a hurry to do something. Inside the room, Wang Lu sighed and lay back down. This was his bedroom, next to the office study. In the bedroom, there were quaint and elegant furniture, immortal plants with rich spiritual energy, and priceless incense provided by the mysterious Sky Mansion, a subsidiary of the Wanxian League. At this time, Wang Lu enjoyed the treatment of a senior elder of the Heavenly Sage Hall. Even the quilt on his body had a magical and mysterious effect. A quilt was enough to bankrupt a small sect at the bottom of the Wanxian League. Unfortunately, all kinds of luxuries added up could not hide the sickly look on Wang Lu's face. Of course, from the look on his face, Wang Lu was still relaxed. Since he achieved some success in non-phase method, it was difficult to see his painful and embarrassed expression. However, as long as one was not blind, one could see his weakness at this time. Behind a brilliant victory, of course, there was a painful price. The Earth Immortals paid the price of 2 lives and a human face. The union of 10,000 immortals seemed to have won a great victory, but that was only because all the losses were on Wang Lu alone. Not to mention, how could it be so easy to resist the poison of little poison immortal with same body insect? If it were any other king pill, the flesh and blood would have been separated and turned into a pool of pus and blood. Even if Wang Lu's attainment in non-phase method was amazing, and he had prepared a whole furnace of detoxification pills, the process was still difficult. Not to mention that it didn't take long for him to control the 5-color soil puppet to fight against Bai Zhe in a short but exciting fight. Using the soil puppet as a substitute would not aggravate the physical injury, but the burden on the primordial spirit was unavoidable. In the case that the poison had not been completely removed, the primordial spirit had to bear the burden again. The pressure on Wang Lu could be imagined. After the fight, the others rejoiced. However, after ridiculing Bai Zhe, Wang Lu vomited blood and fainted on the spot in his master's arms. Fortunately, he had expected this. When he ridiculed Bai Zhe, he was lurking in the dark, so no one could see that he was wearing a golden jade outfit. However, after the fierce battle, the injury that should be healed had to be healed. Fortunately, there was one of the top detoxification experts in the entire 9 regions in the room. The witch doctor of the desolate age, Wu. Chapter 684. Wu had always been mysterious. Among the several good friends of Wang Wu, her origin was the most mysterious. The others basically had reliable origins. For example, the barbarian girl Yu came from the Song clan of the Red Wave Lake in Min region. Shao Qi was a loose cultivator, but in his early years, he was a Zen cultivator under the White Tower Temple of the Eastern Border region. Zhang Miao was also a loose cultivator, but her inherited method was inextricably linked to the 10,000 Arts sect. Only Wu was extremely mysterious. No one had ever heard of her name before. It was as if she jumped out of thin air and then established a solid friendship with Wang Wu. If it weren't for the slender old man who said the word dark witch race, perhaps until now, people's understanding of Wu would still be a blank. With the clue of the dark witch race, many sects with rich collections quickly dug out more information. The history books passed down from the ancient times described the great magical ability of the dark witch race in the Age of Desolation. Between the lines, one could clearly see the fear of the recorder. Unfortunately, the clue ended there. After the end of the Age of Desolation, the dark witch race disappeared along with the Age of Desolation. What happened after that could not be verified at all. The Age of Desolation was a big mystery in today's immortal cultivation world. Many cultivators who were keen on archaeology were fascinated and regretful about that era. Every few decades or hundreds of years, an accidental archaeological excavation would find the relics of the Age of Desolation, which could make people in the circle rejoice. As for the appearance of Wu, the inheritor of the Age of Desolation, it was simply a legend in the archaeological world. Were it not for Wang Wu and Wang Lu, the pair of master and disciple, Wu would have long been taken away by those enthusiastic archaeologists as specimens. And now, this living fossil of 9 regions was sitting quietly in Wang Lu's bedroom, holding a round beetle in her hand. She then stared at Wang Lu seriously without speaking. After sending his master away, Wang Lu had just breathed a sigh of relief. When he turned his head and saw the beetle in Awu's hand, he was startled. "I think I'm fine now." Awu tilted her head, revealing a puzzled look. Wang Lu immediately explained, "I think I'm in a good state now, so I don't need any special treatment. Little Poison Immortal is dead, and the residual poison in my body can be eliminated with my own resistance." Awu's head tilted even more, and then she wrinkled her nose. "Are you pretending?" Wang Lu was immediately startled. "Miss, what do you mean by that?" Awu then said, "Xiaowu told me that if you have no ability but insist on saying that you have ability, it's called pretending." Wang Lu was silent. He felt that it was a bit difficult to explain this problem to Miss Awu. Awu didn't say anything more. She forcibly opened Wang Lu's quilt and threw the beetle in. F***ck. Wang Lu was shocked. In the next moment, he felt a chill in his abdomen. The beetle had already pounced over, its dagger-like mouth piercing into his abdomen. At this time, he was poisoned, and his non-phase method was almost on the verge of dispersing. His defense was less than 1/10 of his perfect state. However, even so, he was almost immune to the attack below shoot on stage. However, in front of this ordinary beetle, his strong physical defense was as if it didn't exist. Fortunately, the beetle was not used to harm people. After it pierced into Wang Lu's abdomen, it began to suck the poison in his body. In a moment, most of the blue color on Wang Lu's face was gone. However, the beetle that Wang Lu secretly resisted naturally had an extraordinary side effect. After a cup of tea worth of time, most of the poison in Wang Lu's body was gone, and he seemed to be a bit thinner. Although the muscles on his face didn't move, his expression was obviously a bit stiff. "What's wrong, are you not feeling well?" Awu frowned. In order to paralyze the host, this beetle should spit out a secretion that stimulates pleasure. "Is it ineffective on you?" Wang Lu gritted his teeth. "You think too much, the effect is very good." It was just that, inexplicably, there was a surge of pleasure in his lower abdomen, which most people would not feel at ease to enjoy. Only a bonobo could enjoy pleasure at any time and anywhere. However, after listening to Wang Lu's answer, Awu's brows wrinkled even tighter. "Don't you like pleasure, like pain? You're really a strange person. I finally know why the famous dark wizard race was exterminated. Your race is really good at chatting." Awu tilted her head and thought for a moment. "Right?" After a while, when Awu saw that the poison in Wang Lu's body had almost subsided, she said, "For the next 3 days, take a good rest. Don't use your true yuan at will, and don't fight with people. The side effect of the detoxification insect is very strong. You don't have the blood of the witch race, so you can only offset part of it with your non-phase method." Understood. Although the process of receiving medical treatment was somewhat unsatisfactory, Wang Lu at least understood that he should respect the doctor when the other party was seriously treating him. He would not vent his anger on the doctor like some mobs who deserved their whole family to die. However, as a doctor, Awu did not have the consciousness of a doctor's parental heart. After dealing with the poison problem, she immediately changed the topic. "Give me the things you promised me." Wang Lu did not hesitate and immediately took out a few things from his mustard seed bag. A slightly smelly porcelain bottle, a piece of air-dried leather, a piece of blurred flesh, and a handful of golden residue. The spoils of the 4 battles are all here. Little Poison Immortal's poisonous blood, Shuero 2's human skin apron fragments, Ravenous Wolf's remains, and the residue of the negation seal. Cherish them, any one of them is priceless and irreplaceable. This was a matter of course. The 3 props provided by Awu, any one of them was a priceless treasure. It was not that Awu had spent immeasurable effort to cultivate them, but their role was irreplaceable. Without same body goo, golden silkworm goo, and 5-color earth puppet, it was impossible to have the brilliant victory under the leadership of Wang Lu. And what was the value of the props that could bring victory? It was immeasurable. For such a victory, the Wanxian League was even willing to sacrifice their immortal treasures. Unfortunately, even if the immortal treasures were really sacrificed, the result would not be particularly favorable. In terms of immortal treasures, the number of immortal treasures in the hands of the Dixian camp was also not small. And the three props that could bring victory were of course more valuable than immortal treasures. Wu even took out immortal treasures, so it was only natural for her to ask for some in return. It was just that the value of these 4 spoils of war was equally good, so Wang Lu repeatedly emphasized it to show the great sacrifice he had made. Wu didn't care so much. She glanced around, nodded, and said, "There is more." Wang Lu asked, "What else?" "We agreed that I will give you same body goo, golden silkworm goo, and 5-color earth puppet, and then all the spoils of war will belong to me." Wang Lu said, "Yes, they are all here, you can take your time." "It must be more than these, take out the rest." Wang Lu was surprised, how can it be more than these? Where is the rest? Wu shook her head, "Xiao Wu told me that you are her disciple and have inherited her mantle." "Yes, and then?" At present, Wang Lu was not clear how close Wang Wu was with these good friends. Therefore, he did not say that in addition to the master-disciple relationship, the real relationship between him and Wang Wu was so complicated that it was necessary to reformulate ethical standards. Wu didn't think so much and said naturally, "Since you have inherited her mantle, then you must have also inherited her shamelessness. When Xiao Wu divides the spoils of war, she always hides some, so of course you will also hide some. What is on the table is only a part, and the rest is kept by you. If someone sees through all this, you will share the spoils with her." After Wu finished speaking, she stretched out her hand, "However, I have already seen through everything, so give me the remaining part." Wang Lu didn't say a word. After a long silence, he took out a porcelain bottle from his mustard seed bag, "That's all." Wu nodded and picked up all the things on the table. "You can take your time to rest, I'll leave you to it. But I haven't tested the quality of those things yet. If there's any problem, I'll come back to you. Your injury is not completely healed, and there is still a trace of poison left in your body, so don't always try to deceive me, I won't be fooled again and again." With that, this witch doctor with an incomparably sincere expression stored all the spoils of war into a skull at his waist, and then left with light steps. On the sickbed, Wang Lu's mood was complicated. Since his debut, Wang Lu had repeatedly won with his wisdom. The opponents who were played by him in the palm of his hand were innumerable. But just now, it was really a tragic sight. Wu's experience of the world was not deep, and her heart was without shrewdness. Her simplicity was even more exaggerated than Lu Li's. As a result, she saw through his little stash at a glance. Wang Lu did intercept a bottle of poisonous blood, not for anything else, but to consider that it might be useful in the future competition. But stash was still stash. If it were Wang Wu's temperament, after exposing Wang Lu's behavior, she would have ridiculed him. However, Wu didn't say anything and just picked up the things. However, this was actually a greater blow to Wang Lu, because he felt that his conscience, which had dried up for many years, seemed to have been condemned. In fact, Wu's straightforward attitude could be considered as not giving people face. However, listening to her words, "I won't be fooled again and again," would only make the listener feel sad and pity, completely unable to get angry. Wang Lu only felt that the culprit who made this naive girl fall for it again and again should be struck by lightning. As soon as he thought of this, he heard a leisurely and relaxed voice floating in from the outside. "Ha ha ha, Wang Lu, you slut, you used processed goods to perfunctorily brush me off. Fortunately, I reacted in time. Just now, I had a brainwave and sold that pile of junk to Wu at its original price. Wu is really a treasure bag, there's everything in that string of skulls on her belt, ahaha." Wang Lu sighed and, regardless of his injury, forcibly circulated his true yuan and released a spell. "What the, you traitorous disciple, you dare to strike me with lightning?" Chapter 685. Wang Lu's injury was decisively healed after 3 days. However, when he got out of bed, he felt that the whole world had been turned upside down. The first was the work. During the 3 days of recuperation, Wang Lu boldly used Hai Yunfan to temporarily replace him. This pushed the relatively low-key disciple of 10,000 arts sect to the forefront of the struggle, which made him flustered for a while. Because of Wang Lu's excellent performance as the chief planner, more and more work had been confidently and boldly handed over to Wang Lu by Supreme Hichu. That kind of workload, if it were any other executive elder of Heavenly Sage Hall, would have long complained. However, Wang Lu handled it easily, mainly because he was too bold and daring, and could frequently use the tactic of cutting the Gordian knot. Unfortunately, there was only one Wang Lu in 9 regions. Now that he was injured, the staff gap was immediately exposed. Hai Yunfan was undoubtedly a qualified bureaucrat. Unfortunately, compared with Wang Lu, there was still a big gap. This gap was not necessarily a gap in intelligence. Dealing with daily affairs did not require a genius or original idea, but more of the accumulation of experience. Hai Yunfan had been Wang Lu's secretary for a long time, so his intelligence and experience were enough to deal with it. What was difficult to deal with was his boldness. Wang Lu's boldness was too strong. In many cases, even the high-level elders of Heavenly Sage Hall, he dared to directly refute the other party's face. In any case, Hichu Daoran, the biggest person in Heavenly Sage Hall, gave him face, so he didn't have to give anyone face. However, if it were Hai Yunfan, even if he had 100 guts, he would not dare to do what Wang Lu did. He too favored Wang Lu, but he never favored Hai Yunfan. Those elders might not dare to do anything to Wang Lu, but they could easily vent their anger on a mere Hai Yunfan. Therefore, when Hai Yunfan dealt with official business, he felt that his hands and feet were tied. There were many things that he couldn't make a decision on, so he could only push them all to Wang Lu, who would recover in a few days. Even so, there were still many things that he couldn't push away, which made Hai Yunfan complain incessantly, and he couldn't avoid making mistakes during the process. With Hai Yunfan's identity and status, if he was in Wang Lu's position, any mistake could lead to disastrous consequences. Fortunately, he had the right timing, and in the end, he managed to get through the crisis without any mishaps. The so-called timing referred to the excellent record of the Wuxia League in the grand competition in the past 3 days. After the end of the King Pill level challenge, 7 more matches were held in the next 3 days. There were both civil and military matches, and the Wuxia League had won 6 of them. One of them was a Yuanying stage level challenge. The 4th elder of the Lingjian school, Zhou Ming, appeared and severely injured Shuero II, who was in Yuanying stage, with 1 sword strike, splitting his already incomplete human skin apron in half. This battle simply made the people of the Wuxia League burn. The previous victory in the King Pill level challenge was due to Wang Lu's frequent tricks, but this Yuanying stage level challenge was clearly won by Zhou Ming's strength. The dazzling sword light easily tore through Shuero II's defense. Even if he brought out a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, he couldn't prevent the arrival of failure. Although Zhou Ming showed very obvious symptoms of exhaustion after the battle, in the whole process of the battle that lasted for a whole incense stick of time, Zhou Ming crushed his opponent all the way, which made people intoxicated. There was actually a person in the Wuxia League who could rely on his strength to defeat Dixian in a martial arts fight. This was simply too incredible. Of course, at this time, people seemed to have unanimously excluded the 9 regions #1 King Pill level challenge from the human category. The celebration caused by this victory was enough to cover up Hai Yunfan's slight mistakes in his work. Therefore, when Wang Lu returned from his illness, Hai Yunfan was finally able to wipe his cold sweat and hand over the seal that symbolized his full strength. After receiving the seal, Wang Lu saw a lot of urgent and overdue official business, as well as a lot of trouble caused by Hai Yunfan's improper handling. For this, Hai Yunfan was naturally quite sorry, although he was also somewhat dissatisfied with the forced arrangement of work by Wang Lu. But after all, the mistake was accumulated under his hands, so he didn't want to shirk it. However, Wang Lu had already expected this. He just patted Hai Yunfan's shoulder and comforted him. "It's good that you're alive." Hai Yunfan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "So you were expecting me to make a terrible mistake in these 3 days and then sacrifice myself heroically?" Forget it, if something really happened, would just push all the responsibility to you and then pack up and leave. You're a lonely man without any worries, but I still have a wife here. But on the other hand, it's good that you're alive. Although he only had the authority for 3 days, Hai Yunfan still left a deep impression on many elders. There were good and bad impressions, but after all, he was truly remembered. To Hai Yunfan, who was gradually getting bored in the aspect of cultivation, this was undoubtedly the opening of a new door. After taking back the authority, Wang Lu quickly began to clean up the accumulated problems left by Hai Yunfan. But when he really began to take over the files of the past 3 days, he couldn't help but frown. Little Hai, what's going on? Hai Yunfan, who had resumed his secretary position, looked at the files pointed out by Wang Lu and said, "As you can see, the Wanxian League has won in a row in the 3 days that you were away." Seeing that Wang Lu's eyes gradually turned sharp, Hai Yunfan knew that this question was vague. He paused and then said, "2 of them were brilliant performances by Luo Xiao." Wang Lu and Luo Xiao didn't get along. This was known to many people in the Wanxian League. Of course, Hai Yunfan, as his secretary, was clear about this. According to Wang Lu's opinion, it was best to block this little baldy of Hua Yan's school from the beginning to the end, never giving him a chance to show his face, so that his hard work in the special training of Royal Soldier sect would be completely wasted. Many people were curious as to why Wang Lu would target Luo Xiao like this. Although Wang Lu was not a magnanimous saint, with his current prestige and status, targeting Luo Xiao, who was obviously not on the same level as him, was somewhat beneath his status. Of course, as the disciple of Wang Wu, the master of non-phase peak, losing his status was also a bit of a fluke. Hai Yunfan once seriously asked, and Wang Lu, after thinking about it carefully, told him, "Because he is too ugly." This answer simply made Hai Yunfan sad, but later Wang Lu also seriously said, "There is no clear reason. His performance in all aspects is good, but I just don't want to see him. To be honest, I can only say that he is not pleasing to the eye. And with my excellent aesthetic ability, if I am not pleasing to the eye, it can only mean that he is too ugly. That's all." Although Wang Lu's explanation was not very convincing, his meaning was very clear, and later on, it was indeed implemented. As long as Luo Xiao was not allowed to appear, Wang Lu would stop him no matter what. Therefore, when he saw that Luo Xiao won 2 games in a row, he had to question Hai Yunfan on what exactly he did. In the grand competition, the important ones were usually personally arranged by Wang Lu, while the others needed to be reported to Wang Lu for approval. In the absence of Wang Lu, Hai Yunfan was, of course, responsible for the approval and review. Then, Hai Yunfan let Luo Xiao appear twice and win both times. Wang Lu didn't think that this was negligence. Hai Yunfan was very careful and thoughtful. That was why Wang Lu chose him as his secretary. However, when Hai Yunfan made an unexpected move, Wang Lu certainly needed an explanation. "I can't stand the pressure. His reason for fighting is too good, so I can't refute it." Hai Yunfan said, "The person who recommended him is the elder of Heavenly Sage Hall. I pushed him on the grounds that there are more suitable players in the competition. However, the first choice of the 2 matches coincidentally withdrew for various reasons. Thus, the second choice, Luo Xiao, can naturally come in as a substitute." Wang Lu immediately set up a task force to investigate the reason for the withdrawal of the 2 first choices, and then insist that there must be a great grievance. If the truth is not found out, we will have no face-to-face with the thousands of cultivators who participated in the grand competition. Then, the direct beneficiary, Luo Xiao, will be listed as the primary suspect for detention and interrogation, and then take this opportunity to let the third choice come out. "Do you still need me to teach you this procedure?" Hai Yunfan sighed and said, "Only you can use this procedure, so don't embarrass me. What's more, Luo Xiao's backing is very strong. When I was forced to do nothing, I threw the burden completely on you, claiming that you have made it clear that Luo Xiao has other uses, so I don't want him to appear so early." Wang Lu interrupted again, "When you relay my words, your attitude should be a bit tougher. Just say that I once said that Luo Xiao is a spy from Dixian's side who infiltrated our camp. He should be immediately put into the dark prison and severely tortured. We must not let him ruin our good deeds in the competition. Hai Yunfan was silent for a while and then decided not to entangle with Wang Lu on this topic. In short, that's the situation. After Luo Xiao won twice, his prestige grew. Coupled with some people deliberately adding fuel to the fire, he has been hailed as the glory of the King Pill by many people. Although it's far less exaggerated than yours, he is about to catch up with Lu Li and Zhu Shiyao. I suggest you don't force him in the future. Wang Lu also sighed and said, that's why I reminded you to crush him to death before he makes a conclusive achievement. In the final analysis, the grand competition was, after all, not Wang Lu's word alone. Even Hichu Daoran could not act recklessly. If the other party had already occupied the reason, even if it was Wang Lu, his hands and feet would inevitably be tied. Now, I can only ask Miss Ewu to secretly put a bug on him. The desolate age of insect technique has endless changes. When the time comes, I'll fake the scene and push it to the Dixian camp. Wait for me to think about how to arrange the scene of the murder. With that, Wang Lu fell into deep thought. Hai Yunfan was shocked. How much hatred did Wang Lu have for Luo Xiao? He had never heard of that baldy from Hua Yan school being disrespectful to Wang Lu. It's not just against Luo Xiao. Although I don't like that baldy, since he can bring victory to the Wanxian League, of course, I won't embarrass him. The problem is that the backer behind him is really an eyesore. After the matter of the Master of Heavenly Book building, there are still people who want to jump out and show their existence. I absolutely cannot tolerate this kind of thing. Such an explanation was easy for Hai Yunfan to accept. Wang Lu's point of view had always been like this. In the grand competition, the Wanxian League was the weak side. If they wanted to fight against the strong, they must exert their limited strength to the limit. In this process, the waste caused by the disagreement of opinions and voices must not be allowed. Therefore, even if the means were a bit disgraceful, Wang Lu still pursued the pattern of one word alone. Hai Yunfan understood Wang Lu's idea very well and supported his approach. The only problem was, could one man's word really do it? In these 3 days, undercurrents were surging. Chapter 686. In short, there are always endless people who are unwilling to be left out. In the study room, Wang Lu flipped through the files that Hai Yunfan collected and sighed with emotion. This was the information that Hai Yunfan collected during the period when Wang Lu was injured. Taking advantage of the time when he worked overnight, he collected it. Using the backing of Luo Xiao as a clue, it implicated a long list of cultivators. The big backer that Hai Yunfan feared was naturally Shizhou Jin, who was also the master of Luo Xiao. The leader of the Four-Element School was famous in the Wanxian League. He was known for his powerful strength as well as his picky bloodline theory. He regarded lowly cultivators as ants and artificial spirit root as a stain on immortal cultivation. For this reason, the relationship between the Four-Element School and Xingjing sect was not very harmonious. As for those mortals who had no chance to cultivate, they were not even as good as weeds and could not enter his field of vision at all. In the eyes of Shizhou Jin, there were not that many creatures in 9 regions. Only the noble and talented cultivators could be regarded as human beings. The rest were just like stones. This stubborn bloodline theory had offended too many people. After all, in the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions, aristocratic families were not the mainstream. Although they had various ways to ensure that the probability of their descendants having spirit root was far higher than that of mortals, their fertility rate had always been low. More than 80% of the cultivators in 9 regions came from individual cultivators. In other words, 80% of the cultivators were not human beings in the eyes of Shizhou Jin. To these non-human beings, Shizhou Jin's attitude had always been straightforward. He couldn't see them. He would not be like some extremists, who would directly confront the heretics. He would only ignore the other party. However, in many cases, this made people even more uncomfortable. At a high-level meeting, the person in charge of the organizer cupped his hands and saluted to Shizhou with a warm smile, but he was ignored. At the banquet, the elder at the same table as him politely toasted, but he turned a blind eye to it. There were even times when he encountered evil cultivators wreaking havoc on the streets. He stepped forward and killed the evil cultivator, but he turned a blind eye to the heavily injured cultivator who fell to the ground and bled profusely. He just sat there and watched as the cultivator died of exhaustion. Such a Shizhou would definitely offend too many people. Among the high-level elders of Heavenly Sage Hall, he had always been a controversial person. However, in many people's eyes, Shizhou was unquestionably a good person. This was because he was generous, loyal, and honest to those who could be considered human in his eyes. Almost all virtues could be placed on him, and he was fully deserving of them. That high-level meeting that ignored the organizer was the result of him taking advantage of the current situation to resolve the dispute between the two families that had deep grudges. One meeting saved the lives of the two families and thousands of people related to them. At that banquet, he had condescended to come to a low-ranking aristocratic family and officiate the wedding, all because the ancestor of the family was old friends with him. The evil cultivator who was killed by him was the famous evil cultivator in the evil path. His real strength was similar to his. It was easy to repel him, but it was as difficult as ascending to heaven to kill him. However, on that day, Shizhou did not hesitate to detonate two top-grade spiritual treasures and cut off his own arm to crush that evil cultivator. Shizhou was such a cultivator with clear likes and dislikes. In his 1,500 years of cultivation, he made outstanding contributions to the Wuxia League and made a lot of friends. Even the most hostile to Shizhou had to admit that he was absolutely qualified to serve as a senior elder in Heavenly Sage Hall and a standing member of the organizing committee of the grand competition. When it came to his bloodline argument, he could only shake his head and sigh. The above information can explain why Shizhou doesn't like me. Although I do have void spirit root, I came from the mountains, so there's nothing to say about it. However, it can't explain why he likes Luo Xiao. That little baldy from Flower Stern School is also not from an aristocratic family. As Wang Lu flipped through the information on Shizhou, he casually concluded, although Shizhou is a character with mixed reputation in the Wuxia League, there are many people who support him, from high-rank sects to aristocratic families. In addition, his popularity among the monsters and spirit beasts is also quite good. It's not an exaggeration to say that he has a force. As he said that, a voice of doubt came from the opposite side. Why does this kind of person have so many supporters among the monsters and monsters? Bai Shixian opened her clear eyes and asked incredulously. As an immortal beast of the cloud platform, she could not understand this phenomenon. Because it was reasonable to say that the monsters and spirit beasts were the biggest victims of the bloodline argument. Those who emphasized bloodline would at least recognize the equally noble human beings, but they would never recognize creatures other than human beings. Even the pure immortal beasts were no exception. That being the case, why would the monsters and spirit beasts support a bloodline argument? However, this kind of meeting was, after all, too difficult, and there were hidden dangers. The larger the organization, the more difficult it was to unite. To be able to do this, to a large extent, it relied on the external threat of Dixian. When the external threat weakened, the internal contradictions inevitably surged up. At the beginning, when the Wuxia League was still in an absolute weakness, there were people like the master of heavenly book building who went against the trend. Fortunately, Wang Lu suppressed them in time. Now, if Shizhou came out to make trouble, the situation would be a bit troublesome. After thinking for a long time at the desk, Wang Lu still felt that he could not let it go. It was really troublesome to deal with people like Shizhou. It was whimsical to expect it to be as easy as dealing with the master of heavenly book building. At least, Aya's tactic of smashing the door to crush him was absolutely not feasible. Shizhou had been cultivating for 1,500 years, so his fighting capacity was definitely on the same level as Aya's. If fighting was not possible. Wang Lu was silent and his eyebrows gradually twisted. After an unknown period of time, Wang Lu stood up from behind the desk and breathed a sigh of relief. In the information, although Shi Jiujin discriminated against the civilian class, he was a straightforward person. His thoughts were almost written on his face. Meeting such a person, face to face, king to king. Immortal 6 Area, 4 Element Sex Station. Wang Lu came alone, but he saw several cultivators waiting in front of the door. 3 on the left and 3 on the right were Daoist Master King Pill, but at this time, they were placed in front of the door like doormen. Sect leader has been waiting for you for a long time. Wang Lu couldn't help but laugh. This pretentious act is really deep. Then he stepped in, not caring about the faces of the 6 doormen. It was not surprising that Shi Jiujin guessed that he would come. Because after learning about Luo Zhao's 2 consecutive victories, he had to take action, and this action would most likely be aimed at Shi Jiujin. The problem was, why did Shi Jiujin, who had always been accustomed to ignoring the civilians, suddenly pay so much attention to him? With a trace of curiosity, Wang Lu walked all the way to the main hall and saw Shi Jiujin, who had been waiting for a long time. 1,500 years did not leave too many traces on him. The person in front of him looked like a young man in his 20s, but his eyes were full of vicissitudes. There was a low table in front of the Supreme, on which there were 2 cups of tea. 1 cup was in front of him, held in his hand, and the other was placed in front of Wang Lu. Wang Lu did not stand on ceremony. He took 2 steps forward and sat opposite to Shi Jiujin. He picked up the teacup and took a sip of the tea, and couldn't help but praise, "Good tea." Shi Jiujin nodded, his eyes were always on Wang Lu's face. After a moment of silence, he went straight to the point. It was a serious topic that Wang Lu had never thought of. "Supreme Wang Lu, when are you going to get married and have children?" Thump. The teacup fell on the table. Chapter 687. There were not many things that could surprise Wang Lu, but Shi Jiujin's words had indeed pierced through Wang Lu's defenses. Before he visited Shi Jiujin, he had more or less guessed what would happen when they met. Being ignored, being provoked, and even fighting, he had a corresponding plan. But Wang Lu had never expected that the other party would raise the issue of marriage. While Wang Lu was in a daze, Shi Jiujin spoke again. "Your age and cultivation have reached the golden age. It's time to find someone to get married and have children." Wang Lu asked, "Is this a special greeting technique of your 4-phase sect?" Shi Jiujin said, "Greeting? What greeting?" Wang Lu said, "Are you serious about what you just said?" "Of course I was serious." Shi Jiujin found it strange. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Wang Lu said, "You look like you're provoking me," but he still took a deep breath and said, "I'd like to hear the details." Shi Jiujin said, "I've been observing you for a long time. At first, I thought you were the same kind of bastard who stole the secrets of heaven, but I soon found that I was wrong. Noble blood flows in your body, and this blood should be passed down, so marriage and children are the inevitable choice, unless you have a disease, but you don't have to worry. I have some special elixirs to treat this kind of disease." Wang Lu couldn't say a word for a long time. After a long time, he said, "I'm very good at my job. If you don't believe me, you can ask your wife to experience it." Shi Jiujin was not angry. Instead, he smiled and said, "I knew it. Since there's no problem, it couldn't be better. The sooner you get married and have children, the better. Your blood is very precious, so it's best to spread." Before the Supreme could finish, Wang Lu had to interrupt him, because there were too many questions in his mind. "Supreme, don't worry. First, please explain in detail the 3 problems of stealing the secrets of heaven, noble blood, and inheritance." Shi Jiujin frowned. "What? You don't even know these questions? What did the Lingjian school teach you?" "Fine, I'll explain it to you from the basics. There is a limit to the number of spirit roots in the world." Shi Jiujin's first sentence began to shake Wang Lu's common sense. There are limited spirit roots in the world? This argument was really new. It was well known that apart from man-made spirit roots, natural spirit roots were highly random. This was reflected on the individual level. When a couple gave birth to a child, it was very difficult to ensure that their offspring had spiritual roots. Of course, some of the cultivation families had more or less grasped some metaphysical theories after thousands of years of accumulation, which could increase the probability of the offspring of the family to be organic cultivators, but it was still difficult to be 100% sure. Even at the level of a large number of people, the randomness of spiritual roots was still difficult to conceal. In different eras, the quality of cultivators could be very different, and it was difficult to say whether there was any pattern. Sometimes, dozens of peerless geniuses could be born in 100 years, and sometimes, there was no outstanding talent in 400 or 500 years. This was the natural spirit roots of the 9 regions. They were highly random and difficult to grasp. If not, Xingjing sect's ancestor Lu He would not have painstakingly studied man-made spirit roots. In fact, that's a lie. Shizhou said resolutely, the spirit roots of the world are indeed scattered, but the total number has always been constant. If the distribution is more concentrated, rare geniuses will emerge endlessly, which is the so-called golden generation. If the distribution is more evenly scattered, which is our so-called low point, because there are too many mixed spirit roots that can't enter the field of vision of the cultivation world. Hearing this, Wang Lu vaguely understood the meaning of Shizhou words. In other words, if the total number of spirit roots is constant, the higher the concentration, the better? Shizhou said, if the same spirit roots are distributed among 10 people, or among 100,000 people, which side is more beneficial to the cultivation world? Between 10 mixed spirit roots and 1 heavenly spirit root, which side is more valuable? It goes without saying, right? Wang Lu was silent for a moment, and then nodded. So, the so-called stealing of heaven's secret means that there are too many mediocre and incompetent people who scatter the distribution of spirit roots, making it difficult for the 9 regions to breed rare geniuses? Shizhou said, on this point, Daoist Wang Lu's understanding is slightly different. Mediocrity is not terrible. There are many mediocre people among my friends. Although they were born in high-ranking families, they have no hope of obtaining the king pill. But I don't think their existence is wrong. So, you mean? Shizhou was silent for a moment, and when he opened his mouth, he changed the topic. Supreme Wang Lu, in your opinion, what is the most important thing for the entire 9 regions immortal cultivation world? Wang Lu smiled and said, this is a big topic. According to the Wanxian League, it's probably peace and development. Shizhou however, shook his head. It's reproduction. For a group, the most important thing is none other than reproduction. Supreme will probably get along well with the people of the Yin and Yang sect. However, Shizhou coldly snorted. Those evil and crooked ways. They only deserve to be spurned by me. Wang Lu thought about it and agreed. The people of the Yin and Yang sect were happy to have sex, but every time they had sex, they took enough safety measures. For a person who advocated reproduction, contraception was definitely the biggest blasphemy in the world. Shizhou seemed to see through Wang Lu's thoughts, and said, reproduction and reproduction are 2 different things. Reproduction, as long as the Yin and Yang incarnate, is considered reproduction, but reproduction refers to the birth of creatures of the same kind as oneself. After a pause, Shizhou used a vulgar metaphor that was contrary to his personal style and said, giving birth to a human is reproduction, and giving birth to a dog is just reproduction. Pfft. Wang Lu couldn't help but laugh out loud. But then he realized that Shizhou so-called reproduction in the cultivation world was definitely not in the ordinary sense of male and female intercourse. It referred to the inheritance of spiritual roots. Cultivators referred to humans who had spiritual roots and could cultivate. Then, only by giving birth to humans who could cultivate could it be considered reproduction. If cultivators gave birth to mortals with other cultivators, wouldn't it be like giving birth to a dog? Then, he also understood why Shizhou was so partial to the cultivation families. It was because these families could artificially control the inheritance of spiritual roots. In a family with excellent inheritance, the union of two cultivators with heavenly spiritual roots had a high probability of giving birth to a cultivator's child. Although it took a lot of effort to make such a combination, which caused their fertility rate to not be too high, it was still much better than those individual investors who tried their luck aimlessly. At the same time, the so-called stealing the secrets of heaven was not difficult to understand. Those individual cultivators and even mortals wantonly gave birth to unknown cultivators with spiritual roots that were drowned in the long river of history. Wasn't this stealing the secrets of heaven from the cultivators? I think I can probably understand the Supreme's idea. If one assumed that the spiritual root resources in 9 regions were fixed, then, as the overall population continued to rise, the spiritual root resources must be more and more dispersed. To make an extreme assumption, if the population increased by 100 times, then it was hard to say whether the golden generation could be born. No matter how strong the randomness was, in the end, it still had to yield to the law of large numbers. At this time, the reproduction of cultivators was very important. If the cultivator group could give birth to offspring stably, they would not be robbed of too many spiritual root resources by a large number of mortals, which could maintain the development of the group. Otherwise, if they were all individual cultivators, then thousands of years later, it would be difficult for the cultivator group to have a future. No matter how strong a cultivator is, it's hard to become immortal. Immortal cultivators seek transcendence and think that they can achieve longevity by flying to the immortal world. However, the current crisis of the fallen immortal has also broken the theory of immortality. In this case, we should admit that it is difficult for an individual to be truly immortal. Only a group can be eternal, at least relatively eternal. Shizhou said, throughout history, the cultivator with the longest lifespan was only 10,000 years. In today's world, the longest-lived old man of the South Pole is only 4,000 years old. However, the history of cultivators, from the Desolate Age, is at least hundreds of thousands of years old or even longer. Xinjiang's sect once excavated the remains of a magic weapon with a history of 2 million years. Compared to the lifespan of an individual, the group of cultivators is the real longevity. When Wang Lu heard this, he sighed and said, however, if it is difficult to ensure the reproduction of the group, the cultivators will eventually die out. Shizhou said, that's exactly the case. It's really gratifying for Daoist Wang Lu to be able to understand all this so quickly. Wang Lu smiled and did not answer. Shizhou's idea and even all his assertions were based on the fact that the spiritual root resources in 9 regions were constant. At present, there was no absolutely reliable evidence to prove this. Of course, Wang Lu was not questioning the other party, and even to a certain extent, he agreed with this point of view. Similarly, he also agreed with the idea of strengthening the reproduction of cultivators and improving the vitality of the group. However, like 4-Element Supreme, he took this point of view to the extreme, believing that people with the ability to reproduce were of noble blood, while the rest were just weeds that stole the secrets of heaven. He believed that only by strengthening reproduction could the race live long. Wang Lu could not agree with these points of view. However, Wang Lu did not come here to have a dispute of ideas. There were many weirdos among the elders of Heavenly Sage Hall, and many of them were more paranoid than Shizhou. Not to mention others, the one on Non-Phase Peak was a good example. He came here to maintain the stability of the Wanxian League. Shizhou should not be a spoiler in this situation. But before Wang Lu could speak, Shizhou said, let's get back to the topic. Daoist Wang Lu, when are you going to get married and have children? I have observed you. Although you are not a disciple of an aristocratic family, you have an unusually strong attribute of reproduction. If you marry an ordinary woman, you will definitely be able to give birth to good offspring. If the blood flowing in those disciples of aristocratic families is noble blood, then the blood flowing in your veins can be called the blood of a king. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu wrinkled his brows. Although it was good to be praised, to this point, it was simply absurd that one fan could win 10 haters. Supreme, please stop for a moment. How did you judge what is an unusually strong attribute of reproduction in my body? When Shizhou heard this question, he seemed to be even more surprised than Wang Lu. Didn't you just say it yourself? You have a big tool and good skills. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. Chapter 688. Wang Lu had always believed that whether it was as a human being or as a cultivator, one should focus on moving forward bravely. This bravery did not mean that one would not look back after hitting the wall, but that one should not regret what he had done and always look forward. But now, Wang Lu really regretted coming to Shizhou to discuss the issue of reproduction. Immortal Wang Lu, you can trust my judgment on this point. I have been paying attention to the way of reproduction for a long time, and it is very easy to judge a person's ability to reproduce. Can you roughly explain how you judge? Hearing Wang Lu's question, Shizhou showed a somewhat excited look. It's very simple. First, it's the shape. Shape. Yes, it's the shape of the reproductive organs. The length and diameter are the basic attributes. In addition, wait, how do you know the shape of other people? Shizhou was quite proud. Of course it's because I have a pair of good eyes. For this reason, I have really done some cultivation. Even through clothes, I can judge the attributes of a person's organs. However, many people will set up defensive spells outside the body to deceive the truth inside. This requires a little bit of effort, but it is not difficult for me. The shape of the organ is only the basic, in addition to the intensity of the yang energy, and then, in addition to men, I can also judge the attributes of women. Of course, this is a little more troublesome. Please stop for a moment, Shizhou. I want to ask you something. For so many years, has anyone told you that your behavior is generally called a hooligan? Shizhou blinked his eyes. Why? It seems that no, then let me reluctantly say this, you are really a hooligan. Shizhou frowned, thought for a moment, and shook his head. It doesn't matter. How the mediocre people in the world judge me has nothing to do with me. Don't I know how many people in the Wanxian League call me a bloodline dog? How many people hate me for being cold-blooded and ruthless? However, the world is heartless and treats all living things as dogs. The reproduction of a race is bound to be accompanied by a lot of cold-blooded and ruthless. Wang Lu was simply amazed by this four-element supreme. He was indeed worthy to be called a supreme because he was such a high-class rogue. Then, since we are colleagues, I would still give you a suggestion, it's better to use this kind of judgment less. Shizhou nodded and said, of course, I won't use it frequently. This comprehensive judgment is far more than a simple shape analysis. In order to be accurate, it needs to involve the field of cause and effect. In my current cultivation, the consumption is not light, so I won't use it often. Fortunately, I found that Taoist Master Wang Lu has a strong attribute. If I can give your Wang Lu's void spirit Lu's attribute, I will give you. Imagine, if a 100 years, there, 100 of Taoist Wang Lu, and if as there a Dao Shizhou was so impassioned that even Wang Lu couldn't help but be distracted. He wondered what would the situation be like if there were 100 of him. However, if he thought about it, it would probably be very serious for him to kill each other. He was never the type of person who was willing to be under others. Of course, those were later words. The problem now was, therefore, Taoist Master Wang Lu, you should get married and have children as soon as possible. I have paid attention to your situation, and there is no lack of confidence around you. The two successor disciples of Lingjian School, the two spirit beasts by Shixian and Quan Zouhua, as well as the Night King from the Western continent, these are all your first choices. Among them, I strongly recommend you to combine with Zhu Shiyao. Her sword spirit root physique is unique. If it can be combined with your void spirit root, the future is limitless. In addition, there is Lu Li. Her brilliant sword heart is not inferior to Zhu Shiyao's stellar sword method, but it slightly overlaps with the characteristics of your void spirit root, so it should be placed second. As for Bai Shixian and Quan Zouhua, although they are not pure human beings, they have completed their transformation and have some human characteristics. If they are combined with you, there may be interesting changes, which is very beneficial to the enrichment and diversity of the population. However, the changes may be good or bad, which requires you to keep trying and win by quantity. As for the Night King from the Western continent, I advise you to be careful. If she is not of our race, her heart must be different. If she returns to the Western continent with your flesh and blood, it would not be a blessing for our 9 regions. Dogs can, but Western continent people can't? Unexpectedly, you're not only a dog fan, but also a nationalist. Speaking of which, if the goal is not limited to Lingjian School, I think Xianghua Ferry is also a good match. In terms of comprehensive quality, she is actually on the same level as Zhu Shiyao, and among the cultivators of the same generation, she is the closest to you. In addition, Zhou Mumu of Kunlun Immortal Sect is also good, and it is said that you have a good relationship with her, so the possibility of in-depth development is not low. Speaking of this, some people said that you have a relationship with several disciples of Yin and Yang School, and it seems that their leader is called Tian Daolan. I advise you to draw a clear line with them as soon as possible. Yin and Yang School is obsessed with the pleasure of men and women, which is simply a crooked path. Immortal, I really admire you for your gossiping skill. You even know what happened between me and those girls of Yin Yang sect? Shijiao Jin snorted, but he looked a bit proud. Wang Lu was really convinced by this person. Now that he thought about it, the reason why this guy was not popular was probably not because of his bloodline. The main reason was that he was really a pervert. While thinking, he heard Shijiao Jin said, "In my opinion, if Taoist Master Wang Lu is willing to abandon his sect and seniority, there are many good choices among the senior cultivators." Wang Lu repeatedly shook his head. "I don't have any sexual interest in mature women." "Really? That's a pity. Speaking of which, my 8th daughter is actually not bad. She's only 300 years old this year, and she already has Yuanying stage cultivation base. No need. Well, I also think she's a bit lacking. Although my daughter's cultivation talent is also not bad, she's still not as good as you. By the way, how's your master? His cultivation base and temperament are a perfect match for you." Enough. I'll seriously consider the matter of reproduction, but this time I'm not here to discuss the matter of reproduction with Supreme. Shijiao Jin nodded. The explanation just now had greatly satisfied his desire to show off. It was time to listen to what Wang Lu had to say. First of all, let's start with Luo Xiao. May I ask why Supreme only favors Luo Xiao? He's also from a small family background. Supreme won't change your mind just because of his attainments in chess and because you won against the black and white ancestor, right? Shijiao Jin said with a smile, "Of course not. It's just a small skill in chess. What's the point of mentioning it? I took a fancy to his inheritance and reproduction ability. Perhaps it's not as good as yours, but it's definitely worthy of the 4 words big tool. Before determining your attribute, I've always regarded him as the focus of the next generation of cultivators to be cultivated. Is the way you determine the focus of a cultivator's ability to reproduce?" Shijiao Jin said seriously, "That's very important. Other than that, is there any other reason?" Shijiao Jin said, "Of course there is. I don't know what prejudice you have against Luo Xiao, but in my opinion, he's one of the few geniuses in the world. Although it's difficult for him to reach your achievements now, don't forget that you're from the Lingjian School, one of the 5 masters of the Wanxian League, while he's just a Zen cultivator from the Huayan sect. The starting point of the two of you is too different." Geniuses? Wang Lu pondered over Shijiao Jin's wording, but the uneasiness in his heart deepened. Supreme has been in contact with him for a long time. In your opinion, is this person reliable? Shijiao Jin frowned. "Jinren Wang Lu, do you suspect that there's a problem with him?" "It's not really a suspicion, so I'm asking for Supreme's opinion. If there's really anything suspicious, I wouldn't have waited until now." Shijiao Jin thought for a moment and said, "No one is absolutely reliable, including you. Once you encounter enough temptation, you'll eventually betray." Wang Lu said, "I don't deny this, but different people have different prices. If you want me to betray, I'm afraid no one can offer such a high price." Shi Jiujin said, Luo Xiao is also not a person who can be easily bought. Although he's of ordinary birth and looks amiable and humble, he has extraordinary pride inside and won't tolerate being bought by others. In a sense, he has a lot in common with you. As he said this, Shi Jiujin looked down and nodded slightly. Yes, there are indeed similarities. I say. Without waiting for Wang Lu to refute, Shi Jiujin said, if you were him, a rising star from Huayan School, who wants to shine on the stage of the grand competition, but the person who planned everything doesn't like you, what would you do? Wang Lu frowned and said nothing. If I were you, I would give him a fair stage. According to your temperament, you shouldn't be afraid of such a challenge. Wang Lu was still silent, but in his heart, he was thinking about whether there was really any problem with his way of dealing with Luo Xiao. According to Shi Jiujin, Luo Xiao was just a genius who had a strong desire to show off and was eager to achieve something in the grand competition. If so, there was no need to suppress him. Instead, he should be given a stage to show off and make full use of his talent. Wang Lu didn't think that his vision could be better than Shi Jiujin's. Although he was a pervert, he was undoubtedly the best among the perverts. With 1,500 years of cultivation, he should not misjudge a person's position. Thinking of this, he heard Shi Jiujin say, many people in the Wanxian League know that Daoist Master Wang Lu hates Luo Xiao. I think if Daoist Master Wang Lu can show his magnanimity on the issue of Luo Xiao, I think those few people who still have objections to Daoist Master Wang Lu will have nothing to say. Wang Lu sneered, is this the condition of cooperation proposed by Supreme? Shi Jiujin was silent. Very well, I'll take it as Supreme's acquiescence. To be able to get the support of Supreme, what is a mere Luo Xiao? Next, I won't stop him anymore. I'll just let him play at will on the stage of the grand competition. Chapter 689. He is indeed a genius with a big tool. In just half a month, he has shown his talent and shone brightly. In the courtyard of the Immortal 5 area, Wang Lu was reading the latest news in the study, clicking his tongue. In the trading area, the Baldi figurines should be almost out of stock, right? Hai Yunfan, the secretary on the side, replied, the sales are indeed good. During this time, he has won consecutive battles, and with the operation of some people, his popularity has skyrocketed. According to the results of the mysterious Sky Mansion survey, his popularity index can already be ranked in the top 10 of the Wanxian League. Whether it is strength or management ability, it is amazing. Wang Lu said, of course, he will have amazing performance if he can be chosen by Shi Jiujin as a son-in-law. In fact, you haven't seen the most amazing part of him. Hai Yunfan was surprised, Shi Jiujin chose him as a son-in-law. Isn't Luo Xiao a Zen cultivator? Wang Lu sneered, happy Zen, haven't you heard of it? Hai Yunfan naturally heard that this was a joke, but the matter of Shi Jiujin looking for a son-in-law was probably not groundless. Thinking of the little Baldi who was very devout in Zen and had a bitter face when Shi Jiujin dressed him as a groom, he couldn't help but smile and shake his head. If the matter of a son-in-law is true, then he is really lucky. It seems that Shi Jiujin wants to pass on all his life savings to him. It's just that a true gentleman has many children, and there are more than a dozen daughters alone. I wonder which one he is going to marry. Wang Lu smiled, maybe there are many. After all, he has a big tool and a good life. Monogamy can no longer stop him. A big tool and a good life. Wang Lu waved his hand. In short, you don't have to follow Luo Xiao so closely. If he wants to be a star, let him be. Now that Shi Jiujin is endorsing him, there is no need for me to meddle. Is that so? All right, I'll find someone to place an order for the secret mountain cultivators and have them keep a close eye on them. Wang Lu immediately smiled. Little Hai's secretary was really considerate. Ever since he became the chief planner, there were some things that he couldn't say directly. Even if he had to say it, he had to say it in reverse. At this time, as a secretary, whether or not he could correctly understand the leader's intentions was a test of his skill. And Little Hai's performance rarely disappointed him. Wang Lu nodded. Pay attention to the way you do things. Hai Yunfan sighed. Don't worry, I won't implicate you. Luo Xiao is now the target of public criticism. You're not the only one who has their eyes on him. Even if you're exposed, you can push the blame onto others. Hidden Mountain has received a lot of orders for Luo Xiao. Heh, this is the fate of celebrities. Let Shijo Jin and the others have a headache. Wang Lu shook his head and then put aside all the information about Luo Xiao and shifted his attention to other affairs. Since he reached an agreement with Shijo Jin half a month ago, Wang Lu had let Luo Xiao do as he pleased. In the past half a month, Luo Xiao had applied for 7 consecutive competitions, all of which were approved by Wang Lu. There were even some competitions where, in order to arrange for Luo Xiao, they did not hesitate to forcibly take the originally determined candidate, which caused a lot of controversy. However, Luo Xiao won again and again. Including the previous 2 competitions, his record of 9 consecutive victories was dazzling and showed his sharpness. Soon, he became a rising star in the City of Immortals. In this regard, Wang Lu was not surprised. Luo Xiao could make Shijo Jin take him so seriously, so he was not an embroidered pillow. It was inevitable that he had some strength. However, that was all. 9 consecutive victories looked brilliant, even more dazzling than Wang Lu's 5 consecutive victories. However, the difficulty of the 2 could not be mentioned in the same breath. One was to single-handedly turn the tide when the Wanxian League was in full decline, while the other was to pursue victory. Moreover, there was no hard fight in the 9 matches, so the value of the 2 was very different. A large part of the current fame was the credit of hype. Therefore, there was no need to spend too much energy on Luo Xiao. In contrast, the Dixian camp was more worthy of attention. Wang Lu was a person who could distinguish between priorities. His displeasure with Luo Xiao was only a private matter, which could be said to be insignificant in the context of the entire grand competition. It was a good habit of Wang Lu to not abandon the public for personal reasons. Unfortunately, just as Wang Lu turned his eyes away, Luo Xiao was unwilling to be left out. 5 days later, Luo Xiao's 10th match ended. The content of the match was only a minor detail. A victory could only be exchanged for 2 victory points, which could even be described as chicken ribs. However, for Luo Xiao, this was his 10 consecutive victories. 10 consecutive victories, even if the value was slightly insufficient, was still a shocking enough topic. For a time, countless people flocked to Luo Xiao. Even the main newspapers and magazines under the mysterious Sky Mansion sent a special person to interview him. And in the interview, there was an interesting dialogue. Daoist Master Luo Xiao, do you feel surprised by your current achievements? This question was actually a standard free-point question, impression points. Luo Xiao only replied humbly as usual, such as, yes, I didn't expect to play so well. It must be because of everyone's support. I hope I can continue to get everyone's support in the future and make due contributions to the grand competition. However, this time, Luo Xiao chose another answer. Yes, I didn't expect the 10 consecutive victories to be so late. I thought it would be earlier. Unfortunately, the applications for the previous matches were suppressed. Probably, I haven't been able to prove myself at that time. At that time, the reporter who heard this froze for a long time before he realized that Luo Xiao was blatantly targeting Wang Lu. Thus, the reporter immediately threw out more stimulating questions. Presumably, Daoist Master Luo Xiao also knows that your record of 10 consecutive victories has broken the highest record in the grand competition so far. The previous record holder is Daoist Master Wang Lu's 6 consecutive victories. What do you think of this? Luo Xiao said with a smile, this is not a simple comparison of numbers. Daoist Master Wang Lu's result is much higher than mine. However, this is only temporary. The grand competition is only halfway through, and most of the key matches have not yet begun. I think I have enough time to surpass the previous record. When it came to this, his meaning could not be more obvious. In this regard, people marveled at Luo Xiao's amazing feat, but they also marveled at the fact that among the cultivators of this generation, there were people who dared to challenge Wang Lu head-on. Then they began to wonder how Wang Lu would react. As everyone knew, Wang Lu didn't like Luo Xiao from the beginning, and the suppression against him had been a topic of conversation for many people. At this time, Luo Xiao's 10 consecutive victories made his suppression policy very embarrassing. Moreover, today's tit-for-tat seemed to be a reasonable retaliation. Whether Luo Xiao could shake Wang Lu's position or not, what kind of attitude would Wang Lu take in the challenge of this rising star? As everyone knew, Wang Lu never seemed to be a magnanimous person. In the courtyard of Immortal 5 area, Wang Lu looked at the latest report presented by Hai Yunfan and laughed angrily. What a joke! How dare they question my breadth of mind? Now these media reporters really know how to play tricks. If I were really narrow-minded, with my current authority, wouldn't it be easy to shut down and rectify several magazines? It's only because they see my generosity that they dare to jump up and down in front of me. Hai Yunfan had a different opinion on this. I don't think it's so simple. These newspapers and magazines have been promoting Luo Xiao before, and it's obvious that someone is manipulating them. I thought it was Shizhou Jin at first, but after investigating, I found that it was not so. Wang Lu said, it doesn't matter who is manipulating them. What's important is that since they have questioned it, it's not right for me to not give an answer. Little Hai, help me prepare a celebration ceremony in 2 days. Celebration ceremony? Hai Yunfan frowned. To celebrate your several consecutive victories? Wang Lu laughed. Wrong, not to celebrate my consecutive victories, but to celebrate Luo Xiao's 10 consecutive victories. Doesn't he want to be glorious? Then I'll give him glory. 2 days later, the celebration ceremony arranged by Hai Yunfan officially began. The theme was to celebrate Daoist master Luo Xiao's 10 consecutive victories in the grand competition. The organizer was the organizing committee of the grand competition, which had a very high standard. The host was the chief planner and executive elder of the organizing committee, Wang Lu himself. In this regard, there was naturally a heated discussion in the City of Immortals. No matter how one looked at it, Wang Lu's battle array seemed to have an ulterior motive. Perhaps there were 500 axemen lying in ambush at the celebration site, so that they could smash Luo Xiao into minced meat. However, Luo Xiao had to attend this ceremony, because Wang Lu also invited many Supremes and Deity Stage Elders of Heavenly Sage Hall, naturally, including Supreme He too, who had always supported Wang Lu. It was an unprecedented grand occasion. Even if he knew that the banquet was not a good one, how could Luo Xiao dare to stand up so many elders? Therefore, Luo Xiao finally came. And then he regretted it. At the beginning of the ceremony, he realized that he really shouldn't have come today. Even if he said that he suffered an internal injury in the match a few days ago, it was better than attending such a ceremony. There were no 500 executioners at the ceremony, nor was there any smashing of cups. In fact, Wang Lu did not show any hostility. He just sat on the rostrum with a serious expression and read the report in his hand. The name of the report was, Report on the Advanced Deeds of Daoist Master Luo Xiao. Chapter 690. Fellow Taoists, today we hold this celebration mainly to celebrate Daoist Master Luo Xiao's 10 consecutive victories in the grand competition. On the one hand, we should carefully summarize the successful experience of Daoist Master Luo Xiao. On the other hand, we should take this opportunity to correctly understand the current situation. Finally, based on the advanced experience of Daoist Master Luo Xiao, we should guide the next step of the work and strive for the final victory in the grand competition. Now, I will elaborate on these 3 aspects. First, a report on the advanced deeds of Daoist Master Luo Xiao. 1. Brave to take responsibility and recommend himself to participate in the competition many times. 2. Diligent cultivation and continuous improvement of strength and cultivation base. 3. Wonderful performance and brilliant victory, in the Purple Cloud Hall of Immortal 5 area, at the celebration ceremony of Luo Xiao's 10 consecutive victories. Wang Lu read the manuscript in his hand in a solemn tone. His voice reverberated back and forth in the hall, shocking people. The Purple Cloud Hall was a place for the high-level elders of the Wuxia League to hold meetings in the Immortal Five area. Not only was the appearance dignified and generous, but the internal facilities were also perfect. The host sat on the rostrum and spoke, and there was an array to spread his voice out. Moreover, in order to ensure the effect of the meeting, the Dixian who built the hall, under the requirements of Wang Lu's drawings, designed the array very tricky. The sound processed by the array reached the people's heart. The sound was loud and deafening. Let alone pretending not to hear it, it was impossible for people to be absent-minded. This most hateful design had now made the people who participated in the ceremony miserable. All of them showed pain in their seats. Their buttocks rubbed from side to side as if they wanted to wear through the futon and the floor under them until a deep pit was drilled in, so that the sound could not be transmitted. It wasn't that everyone wasn't interested in Luo Zhao's glorious deeds. It was just that when Luo Zhao's glorious deeds were narrated by Wang Lu in an official manner, it was even more boring than the 30,000-person group crosstalk at the opening ceremony. It just so happened that Wang Lu had broken up Luo Zhao's affairs in a very detailed way, wishing that he could detail Luo Zhao's life during this period of time, such as the menu for breakfast and lunch, his daily clothes, the books of Zen cultivation, and so on. In fact, if these contents were tabloid gossip, it would certainly make his fans intoxicated, but no tabloid gossip would be written in official style. When everyone finally got through the first stage and began to look forward to Wang Lu's analysis of the current situation of the grand competition. 2. A few views on the current situation. 1. From an internal perspective, a united and progressive competition atmosphere has been formed. First, the various plans of the Wuxia League Organizing Committee have been effectively implemented, specifically in the following aspects. 2. From an external perspective, the killing frenzy of Dixian has been effectively curbed. 3. Overall, at present, opportunities and challenges coexist. The content of these 3 points was clear and organized. The only problem was that it was the same as not saying anything. Everyone looked forward to Wang Lu's analysis of the situation. It was not that they really believed that he had the ability to predict the future, but they valued the large amount of information that he could access from his position. For example, which sect had what elite disciples, which sect had produced a rare and powerful weapon, and so on. Unfortunately, after reading for a whole hour, Wang Lu didn't have even the slightest bit of substance. Instead, he summarized the current situation, but every sentence was watertight, so that no one could find any fault with it. This was indeed a skill. At the end of the second stage, some of the people sitting in the back of the Purple Cloud Hall had already begun to slip away. The people who stayed in the front row watched them leave. It was really painful and regretful. However, soon, the people who stayed stopped their pain and began to look at the rostrum with interest. Because after a long period of nonsense, Wang Lu finally got to the point. The speech was still the same, and every word was still in the official style, but this time, even the cultivators who were not interested in this kind of problem could hear the meaning behind Wang Lu's words. First of all, we must organize all the cultivators to seriously study the exemplary deeds of perfected Luo Zhao. We must set up a special working group with me as the team leader, and all the major sects will send people to participate. During this period, we must organize many study reports, and perfected Luo Zhao will personally talk about his own experience so that more cultivators can benefit. In addition, we must give generous rewards to perfected Luo Zhao and publicize it to attract more cultivators to participate in the competition. As Wang Lu put forward the requirements one by one, Luo Zhao, who was sitting next to him, looked more and more unsightly. If one only looked at the words, there was nothing wrong with Wang Lu's report. Not only did it not lower Luo Zhao's achievements, but it also raised them to a certain extent. The problem was that this report was equivalent to putting Wang Lu himself in a higher position. The special working group was led by Wang Lu himself as the team leader, while Luo Zhao was just an ordinary team member. Moreover, Luo Zhao had to accept his orders and hold many study reports, like a monkey being played by others. The difference in status was obvious at a glance. In fact, the official style itself was already full of cold posture. Indeed, this style, which was born under the advocacy of the vernacular movement of the Union of 10,000 Immortals, was essentially a highly simple and concise text, without superfluous rhetoric, and without unnecessary expression. It was precise and rigorous, and more accurate than the ancient books on cultivation. However, because the official style was too practical, it sacrificed beauty and readability. Nowadays, except for the high and mighty leaders, few people were willing to use such accurate but una-aesthetic words. The fact that Wang Lu used the official style was tantamount to announcing such a fact. No matter how dazzling Luo Xiao was, he was just a soldier, while Wang Lu sat on the rostrum and spoke eloquently. They were both geniuses of this generation, King Pil, but there was an insurmountable gap between the two. Luo Xiao used the momentum of 10 consecutive victories to try to cross this gap to challenge Wang Lu, but now it seemed that he was too hasty. He excitedly issued a challenge, but Wang Lu had no interest in accepting the challenge. At the same time, the elders sitting on the rostrum also observed Luo Xiao's reaction with great interest. They wanted to know how he would deal with this setback, and whether he could recognize the reality and cool down from his overheated state. From their point of view, from the heated discussion about Luo Xiao to Wang Lu's response with this ceremony, the whole thing was a farce. From the beginning to the end, they did not think that there was any problem of two tigers living on the same mountain between Wang Lu and Luo Xiao. They even thought that there was no need to compare the two because they were not equal at all. Only some gossip tabloids would be keen to hype up such a topic, and they constantly speculated who would be superior if the two had the same starting point. It was true that Wang Lu's innate conditions were much better than Luo Xiao's. Whether it was the quality of the spiritual root or the cultivation of the sect, Luo Xiao, who came from the Huayan sect, could not be compared with Wang Lu. There was a huge difference between the two starting points, but it was meaningless to forcibly exclude this gap to talk about who was superior. Otherwise, why would the cultivators of the Wanxian League, who were born after the Age of Chaos, bother to compete with the Dixian cultivators who were born in the glorious era? Wouldn't it be better to just say that they were born after the Age of Chaos? If Luo Xiao really wanted to challenge Wang Lu, he must at least be in the same position as him. And Wang Lu's current position relied on countless brilliant victories. From the time he emerged in the exchange meeting between the disciples of the Lingjian school and the 10,000 Arts sect until now, Wang Lu had subverted people's common sense again and again, defeating all the enemies who stood in front of him. Only then did he have the qualification to be looked at by Hichu Daoran, who entrusted him with important tasks despite his mere King Pil stage. However, it was only recently that Luo Xiao showed his sharpness. The only record that he could bring out was his 10 consecutive victories in the grand competition. And these 10 consecutive victories were more or less borrowed from Wang Lu. In this case, why would Wang Lu need to accompany Luo Xiao to play the challenger game? As Wang Lu's report gradually came to an end, the expression on Luo Xiao's face constantly changed. From the initial astonishment and even indignation, he gradually calmed down and even showed a gentle smile. Finally, after reading the report, Wang Lu patted Luo Xiao's shoulder as an elder and said, "Continue to work hard, Luo Xiao, we look forward to more wonderful performances from you." One we, one you. The two pronouns drew the line that symbolized different classes. Luo Xiao seemed to have adjusted his state of mind, so he smiled generously and said, "I will not let you down." At this point, the Purple Cloud Hall finally had an atmosphere of joy between the host and the guest. Seeing that Luo Xiao changed so quickly, Wang Lu no longer said anything. He just said softly, "Take care of yourself, young man." Then he no longer paid attention to him. He turned around and announced that today's report session was over, and then there was a wonderful entertainment program. The entertainment program was indeed wonderful. The song and dance performance personally arranged by Daoist Master Miao Yen made the cultivators who were about to get hemorrhoids on the praying mat exclaim in satisfaction and feel that the previous ordeal was worth it. However, several of the protagonists of the ceremony had already left early. Wang Lu was very busy. It was already extremely extravagant for him to spend half a day on the ceremony for Luo Xiao. If he spent more time watching the song and dance performance, it would simply be a dereliction of duty. And Luo Xiao was obviously not in the mood to appreciate the program, so he casually found a reason to leave the Purple Cloud Hall. However, as soon as he walked out of the hall, he was surrounded by a group of bald Zen cultivators. Senior brother Luo Xiao. Are you all right? Luo Xiao was startled and found that they were all his fellow disciples in Hua Yan school. Why are you here? A tall bald man couldn't help but say with a smile, today is your big day, senior brother, how can we not come? After saying that, he sighed, but looking at the ceremony, it seems to be different from what we thought. Another person said, I heard that senior brother has a conflict with Taoist master Wang Lu and has been targeted by him. Is that true? A bald man next to him refuted, senior brother Luo Xiao has a straightforward and generous personality. He can be friends with anyone. How could he offend Wang Lu for no reason? I think it's all a rumor. But I just heard an elder in the hall whisper an analysis, saying that Taoist master Wang Lu's report was targeted at senior brother Luo Xiao. Senior brother, is that so? Luo Xiao smiled, don't listen to their nonsense. If there was really a conflict, why would Taoist master Wang Lu hold such a grand ceremony for me? I simply don't deserve it. Senior brother, you're too modest. What's there to feel ashamed about? The result of 10 consecutive victories is now unique. Although those Taoist masters of deity transformation and Taoist masters of unity have high cultivation, I haven't seen anyone who can do what senior brother has done. Luo Xiao pursed his lips and was about to speak, but he heard the excited bald junior brother say again, senior brother, Taoist master Wang Lu held such a grand ceremony for you. Does it mean that he thinks highly of you? He will continue to put you in an important position in the future, right? Luo Xiao couldn't help but smile bitterly. I'm now Shijo Jin's disciple, so I don't need Taoist Master King Pill to think highly of me. Taoist Master Wang Lu is not an ordinary King Pill. He can do many things that Taoist masters can't do. With his help, your cultivation path will definitely be much smoother. Luo Xiao didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he listened to the junior brothers who were once closest to him excitedly discussing how he would benefit from being valued by Wang Lu in the future. After a long while, when the enthusiasm of the junior brothers' discussion subsided a little, he suddenly said, if I said that I want to challenge Wang Lu, what would you think? What responded to him were dozens of extremely shocked eyes. Senior brother, are you kidding? Luo Xiao thought for a while, do you think it's impossible? He is King Pill, and I am also King Pill. There's no absolute gap between us. The youngest junior brother hesitated and said, but, he is Wang Lu. He is Wang Lu, you are not. The words of this junior brother, who had always been known for his outspokenness, really made Luo Xiao depressed. Sorry for the lack of updates these days, but I will try my best to make up for it in the next few days. Please rest assured, in addition, thank you, Grand Alliance Master, for the New Year's Red Banner. I wish Grand Alliance Master and the readers a happy new year and all the best. Chapter 691. How do you feel? In the City of Immortals, at the station of Four Element Sect, Shijo Jin looked with interest at the slowly walking Luo Xiao, his newly accepted successor disciple not long ago. At the recent ceremony, he sat next to Luo Xiao, and he also saw Luo Xiao's reaction. The initial anger and unwillingness eventually calmed down, which made Shijo Jin somewhat gratified. You can't be too hasty in doing things. Now you should understand this more deeply. Shijo Jin said, in today's world, when everyone bows down to Wang Lu, you have the courage to challenge his authority, which I admire very much. But courage alone can't do anything, you need more accumulation. However, you don't have to be discouraged because of a setback. Your talent is not under anyone, and your god of war blood is unparalleled. As long as you give it time. Luo Xiao interrupted, if every time you do something, you can't do anything. When Wang Lu faced the Yuanying stage elder of Beast Master School in Grand Cloud Mountain, he was only in Shidan stage. Did he ever say that he would wait until he reached the same Yuanying stage before fighting him? Moreover, The magical effect of God of War blood is based on locking the target and advancing bravely. Only by facing difficulties can the potential of the bloodline be continuously stimulated. If you are afraid of the opponent's strength and choose to retreat, not only will the God of War blood not be effective, it will also backfire on you. I started as an unknown outer court handyman in Stern Flower School, and after several cross-level challenges, I defeated the lead disciple of the outer court, the lead disciple of the inner court, and the lead disciple of the sect. At that time, regardless of strength, aptitude, or resources, I was far inferior to my opponent. But if I had challenged him several times, I'm afraid I would still be a handyman now. Moreover, if I want to defeat Wang Lu, it's best to do it when my strength is far inferior to him, and I need to challenge him at a higher level. Wang Lu became famous by challenging him at a higher level. If I win in his best field, my God of War blood will truly boil. After listening to Luo Zhao's words, Shi Jiujin frowned and was silent for a moment. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by Luo Zhao again. I know what I just said is a bit whimsical, but I am not Wang Lu. I may not be able to do what he can do. If it were me, who has just entered Shudan stage, no matter what, I would not be able to fight against a Yuanying stage elder of Beast Master School. In the Western continent, it would be even more impossible for me to kill my way out under the pincer attack of many holy ones. His achievements are unimaginable to me, and I know that I'm not as good as him. But the battle god's blood will never change its target. The only thing I need to do now is to keep challenging him until I win. God of War blood. Shi Jiujin pondered for a moment and said, "This bloodline left behind from the Age of Desolation is extraordinary, but the side effect is too strong. If people repeatedly choose to fight against enemies that are difficult to defeat, it's no wonder that the bloodline eventually becomes extinct. If it can be orderly, step by step." Luo Zhao said, "If it's orderly, step by step, then it would lose the original meaning of the God of War blood." Shi Jiujin sighed. Therefore, the possessor of the God of War blood needs a powerful controller to suppress their completely inappropriate challenges, which is a long-term solution. However, how could the possessor of the God of War blood tolerate being controlled for a long time? Falling out is only a matter of time. Luo Zhao, you should know why I accepted you as my successor disciple. I only regret that I didn't meet you a few years earlier. There were all kinds of rumors about Shi Jiujin making an exception to accept Hua Yan School's meditation cultivator as his own successor disciple. Some said that Shi Jiujin was quite dissatisfied with his own sect's disciples, and especially disgusted with their endless infighting. Therefore, he simply found an outsider to stimulate them to return to the right path. Some also said that Shi Jiujin inherited an ancient immortal world inheritance, but the qualification requirement was too high, so he couldn't find a successor in the entire 9 regions. It just so happened that Luo Zhao had such a qualification. Therefore, Shi Jiujin broke the convention and accepted him as his disciple. Of course, there were also people who speculated that it was because Luo Zhao was handsome, only the master and the disciple knew the truth. Not long ago, when Shi Jiujin and Wang Lu were talking, they didn't say everything. Shi Jiujin favored Luo Zhao not only because he had a big tool, good skills, and unusual talent, but more importantly, because Luo Zhao needed a master like Shi Jiujin. A master who could suppress him, support him, and completely not care about betrayal in the future. Luo Zhao was silent for a while, and then said, "I will never forget Master's great kindness. I don't need you to remember my kindness, I only need you to fulfill your obligation to inherit. The God of War blood has been extinct for more than 100,000 years since the Great Desolate Era. Although I don't know why it awakened in you, I hope it can continue to multiply." As Shi Jiujin spoke, his eyes couldn't help but look at the space between Luo Zhao's legs, his face showing approval. Luo Zhao instantly felt his legs tighten, and said awkwardly, "Master, although I've already left the Flower Stern sect, I'm still a Dhyana cultivator." Shi Jiujin said disapprovingly, "What's wrong with Dhyana cultivators? Isn't the joyous Dhyana also Dhyana?" The Flower Stern sect doesn't practice the joyous Dhyana. The Flower Stern sect has never practiced the Dhyana of the God of War blood. 90% of your abilities come from this mysterious Great Desolate Era bloodline. What can the Flower Stern sect teach you? Even your core cultivation method was improved by yourself. Do you think I can't see it? If you really have any Diana in your heart, you should learn from those real baldies and stand aloof from worldly affairs. Why compete with Wang Lu? And now everyone calls you Spiritual Master Luo Xiao. How many call you Diana Master? I've accepted you as my direct disciple for a long time, but I've never heard you mention your Dharma name in the Flower Stern sect. Before Shizhou finished, Luo Xiao knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. Master, I understand. I'll listen to your arrangements. Very good. Shizhou nodded happily. I'll help you find 100 girls in the next few days. Wait, 100? That's too. Shizhou said seriously, your bloodline is too rare. How to awaken it and how to inherit it are all unknown. Now you can only win by quantity. Winning by quantity is too impatient, isn't it? If there's enough time, you can study it slowly. But your god of war blood has locked onto Wang Lu, and you have to challenge him. You can't advance step by step, so you can only advance bravely. You don't know when your bloodline will backfire. There's not much time left for you and your bloodline to reproduce. Luo Xiao was tongue-tied. He didn't expect that his long speech just now had become digging his own grave. You can also use this as an excuse to cancel the report of your outstanding deeds. I believe you have no interest in reading the report like a puppet, right? Luo Xiao swallowed his saliva. No, but in terms of reproduction, 100 people is too. Shizhou snorted coldly. Doesn't the god of war blood require you to be the first in everything? I think Wang Lu's yang energy is very strong. Not to mention 100 people, he can even have 1,000 or 10,000 people. Are you going to admit defeat in this aspect? Are you still a man? Luo Xiao was shocked. I heard that although Jinren Wang Lu has a lot of female friends, he is not licentious. Shizhou snort turned into a sneer. Do you think he needs to inform you that he is licentious? Jinren Wang Lu is now the signature figure of the Wanxian League, a role model for tens of thousands of people. How can there be rumors of him being licentious? Luo Xiao said in disbelief. Master, you mean, Jinren Wang Lu looks decent on the surface, but behind his back he is actually. No, when I was in contact with him, I couldn't feel it at all. Shizhou continued to sneer. If even you can see through it, what qualifications does he have to stand side by side with so many deity transformation Jinren and unity stage Jinren and become the top figure of the Wanxian League today? Luo Xiao only felt that his mind was in a mess. He couldn't believe that Wang Lu was a lustful person. It wasn't that he had a good impression of Wang Lu, but objectively speaking, Wang Lu had never shown much interest in women. It was not a problem for him to have a few female friends, but things like beheading thousands of people and beheading tens of thousands of people were just wishful thinking. But on the other hand, Shizhou had never been a person who liked to talk nonsense. With his identity, he shouldn't deliberately come up with such a ridiculous lie to deceive him. At the end of the day, the two of them were still master and disciple, and he was also sincere to him. If he asked him to do a good job of reproduction as his master, he couldn't object, probably. Of course, Luo Xiao didn't think that Shizhou really didn't like to talk nonsense, but that was only because there was no need to. When it was necessary, for the sake of the great undertaking, he never cared about personal face. Okay, I got it. Master, please arrange it. I will try my best. Shizhou was very pleased. Not bad, not bad. Luo Xiao, you really understand the truth. You are much better than those good-for-nothings in my sect. It was not in vain that I pressured the elders to accept you as my true disciple. Master, you flatter me. As Shizhou said this, he turned around and took out a soup bowl with a lid from his mustard seed bag. This is? Shizhou looked kind and smiled kindly. This is a medicinal soup that I personally brewed to nourish the body. I prepared it a long time ago, but I never had the chance to give it to people. What a pity. Luo Xiao silently took the old soup bowl. Although he knew that the Supreme's mustard seed bag had the function of keeping fresh, and even if it was stored for thousands of years, there wouldn't be any change. In fact, the soup bowl was still warm in his hand. Luo Xiao still felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. But in the next moment, when he opened the lid, the discomfort from before could be ignored. Luo Xiao fell into a great shock that shook his immortal heart. Looking at the countless rod-shaped objects floating in the soup bowl, Luo Xiao only felt his throat dry and his eyes dazzled. He reached out to touch one of them and stammered, this is... Shizhou glanced at it and casually explained, tiger penis. Tiger penis? Then the one next to it is dog penis. The one next to it is sheep penis. Don't worry, they are all spiritual species raised by spiritual plants. They are definitely not ordinary. Apart from these common ones, there are also other whips of spiritual beasts and monsters. For example, this is the full moon roaring whip, that is the four-winged fox whip, and the one that looks smaller, is actually... Wait, there is no need to explain in detail. I just want to ask, what exactly is this soup? This medicinal soup is a unique creation of mine. It is specially used to strengthen the inheritance and reproduction ability. There should be no precedent in the world, so there is no name. But since you asked... Shizhou stroked his beard, thought for a moment, and then decided. Let's call it 100 Whip Soup. Chapter 692. Boss Shu, we have brought this week's goods. In front of a bustling shop in the City of Immortals, a fat middle-aged businessman bent over and rubbed his hands. He looked at the teenager in front of him with a flattering look. Beads of sweat continued to ooze from his forehead, but he did not dare to wipe them. The teenager in front of the businessman glanced at him lightly, then turned his eyes to the carriage behind the businessman and could not help but smile. Master Tan, the weekly supply we agreed on should be more than this, right? The businessman hurriedly complained, Boss Shu, you don't know, I also have my own difficulties. Recently, the teenager waved his hand and said, don't say it, it's useless to say it. I don't need to know what difficulties you have. As a businessman, you can have difficulties at any time. I just want to ask, what if what you do is different from what you say? There was more cold sweat on Master Tan's face, but he couldn't speak. I'm just a newcomer on this street, and as a senior, Master Tan should know better than me that the most important thing in a businessman's business is integrity. The teenager with a particularly tender face unceremoniously scolded the businessman who was several times older than him, which soon attracted onlookers on the street. The fat face of the fat businessman, Master Tan, turned red and purple. Obviously, he was extremely ashamed and angry, but he didn't even have the courage to look up at the other party. He could only sigh inwardly that in this City of Immortals, the new generation really surpassed the old. As the teenager said, he was just a newcomer. Not to mention in this street, he was also a newcomer in the entire business circle. He had only been in the business for a few months at most. Even 3 months ago, his shop was still in a remote corner of the City of Immortals. But now, he had gained a foothold in the bustling street and even had the courage to scold him. The reason was very simple, he was stronger than him. The world of businessmen was the same as that of cultivators. They also paid attention to strength. It was just that the strength of cultivators was reflected in cultivation, while the strength of businessmen was reflected in money. This teenager was richer than him, and he also controlled his money-making lifeline. Thus, no matter how rude he was to him, he could only endure it. How could a businessman who had been in the business for a few months be more powerful than Master Tan who had been in business for decades? It was very simple. Because more than a month ago, the businessmen in the City of Immortals set up a huge gambling house. In that game, some people won and some people lost. The winner moved from a remote small shop to a bustling central street, while the loser had to endure the shame of being rude. The source of the gambling house came from the huge divergence of the businessmen in the City of Immortals in predicting the future. The source of the gambling house was the huge divergence of the merchants in the City of Immortals. At that time, it was the most difficult time for the union of 10,000 immortals in the grand competition. Those who could previously call the wind and summon the rain were silent, such as Daoist He Tu, Daoist Master Nanfei's, and the others. They had no desire to come forward to reverse the situation. Coupled with the fanning of heavenly book building and other sects, the confidence of many people below them was greatly shaken. The merchants from Tian 999 sect. And 99 Zhou, of IMS. Of 9 of sect of me of him. Of him of Chen of sect. However, everyone had different opinions. Some people still had confidence in the Wanxian League, while others felt that the momentum was gone. The largest and most powerful mysterious sky mansion, because of the struggle in the upper class, maintained a neutral stance in this debate, which completely failed to resolve the differences. Thus, the differences led to contradictions, and contradictions led to wars. The war of the merchants would not be a bloodbath, but it was equally tragic. In short, Master Tan, who had a deep foundation among the merchants, for various reasons, chose the pessimistic side. And then, together with many of his peers, he completely fell. Hundreds of years of accumulation and decades of hard work were all turned into running water. Of course, Master Tan was a little luckier than most of his peers. At least he could still survive, while many of his peers had been exposed in the wilderness, which harmed their families. Boss Shu, please give me one more week. Right now, I really can't come up with the goods. The conversation at the door didn't last long. A large carriage blocked the door, and the business of the shop could not continue. In the end, Boss Shu didn't force Master Tan to his death. It was just that after muddling through this obstacle, Master Tan seemed to have shed a few layers of skin. In his heart, he just cursed that this young man from the marketplace was much more ruthless than many of the older seniors. After experiencing a defeat, he had little capital left, but he still had the possibility of making a comeback. However, if he let this young man exploit him a few more times, perhaps he wouldn't be able to make a comeback in this life. On the other side, the young man who returned to the shop said a few words to the shop assistant and then entered the backyard. As soon as he entered the door, he put down his dignified expression and shouted at a proud and aloof figure under the shade of a tree in the backyard. "Huh, dead face, did you see that just now?" Just now, I, your father, released my domineering aura and easily beheaded that dead face. Before he finished speaking, a cold voice interrupted him, a monkey wearing a crown, a fox assuming the tiger's might. "Huh, dead face, you are jealous that I have a cheerful personality. I can preside over the work outside, while you, a gloomy person, can only stay alone." Humph. Dead face coldly humphed, and the temperature of the whole backyard plummeted. Shu Si shivered and quickly stopped talking. After getting along with Dead Face for a few months, he had figured out his temper. Don't look at his usually gloomy face, it didn't matter if he occasionally flirted with him. However, when he coldly humphed, it meant that he was impatient and must stop before going too far. Moreover, from the bottom of his heart, Shu Si actually respected him very much. In just a few months, he had changed from a penniless street punk to a cultivator who officially embarked on the path of immortal cultivation, as well as a hot big boss in the city of immortals. Of course, this was not because of his own ability. More than a month ago, the big gambling in the city of immortals reversed the fate of many people. However, at that time, Shu Si was not qualified to participate in the gambling. His small shop business was booming, but it was still not on the table. It was Dead Face who inexplicably took out a bunch of property deeds and several sealed mustard seed bags. He asked Shu Si to join the gambling and bet heavily on the reversal of the Wanxian League. At that time, Shu Si wanted to say that with just a few pieces of broken paper and a few broken bags in his hands, those local tycoons, who were as rich as a country, would not put them in their eyes. Moreover, the gambling was very meticulous. It was not like comparing the size of a casino, so how could he join just by saying a few words? However, when he really found someone with those things, he was immediately treated solemnly. Not only did he see a large circle of high-level big shots, but someone enthusiastically sent him a large stack of documents, all of which were related to the gambling. Shu Si signed all of them in confusion. Then, he found that as time went by, the property under his name increased. More and more property deeds were sent to him. Occasionally, some ashen-faced businessmen ran to him and knelt down to beg for mercy. Until today, Xu Si actually didn't know how the gambling was carried out. When he mingled in the marketplace, the so-called gambling was nothing more than shaking the dice and playing pai gao. How could it be so complicated and high-end? However, Xu Si was also clever. He didn't think too much about things that he couldn't understand. Anyway, it was Dead Face who did it. If there was a problem, of course, he would be the one to bear it. He just had to let nature take its course. With cultivation and wealth, what more could he ask for in life? Speaking of which, Dead Face, I don't understand. Not long ago, we just made a lot of money with that Luo Xiao. Why did you suddenly change the requirements and withdraw all the projects related to him? This change is too sudden. That Tan guy was almost forced to death by you. Dead Face didn't turn his head, just do it. Of course, I will do it, but at least explain it to me. Am I not your disciple now? Dead Face coldly said, hee hee. Xu Si knew that the other party was using concise and clear words to say, your IQ is not enough to understand too complicated a problem. He suddenly felt helpless. Although he had entered Dead Face's sect, he didn't know the name of this sect. Dead Face was very attentive when guiding him in cultivation, but he didn't care about anything other than cultivation. Moreover, his cultivation method was quite strange. It seemed to focus on hiding his tracks, which made him seem sneaky and sneaky. Of course, Xu Si, who was born in the marketplace, didn't care too much about that. Although he also dreamed of flying on a flying sword, just like immortal Wang Lu who gave him an immortal fate, he always had to understand reality. Just as Xu Si was thinking about it, Dead Face spoke again. Luo Zhao's value ends here. It's not worth continuing to invest in him. It was rare that Dead Face was willing to explain. Xu Si quickly raised his spirits and asked, even if you don't think highly of him, at least give him some buffer time. Now, in addition to that Tan guy, there are several merchants who are complaining to me, Dead Face said, it's too late to get rid of him. Now, there are many people who see that Luo Zhao's value has been exhausted. It's just that it's difficult to get rid of him for a while, and they still have a fluke mentality, hoping that he can hold on for a while. But when they realize that the situation is irreversible, they will get rid of him even if they have to cut their own flesh. At that time, the situation you have to face will not be as simple as listening to people's complaints. After hearing this, Xu Si suddenly showed a look of excitement. Dead Face, what happened to you today? Why are you so naggy? What's going on with that Luo Xiao? Wasn't the celebration hosted by immortal Wang Lu a few days ago? I heard many people say that Luo Xiao will have a promising future. Dead Face sneered, if there was no Wang Lu's celebration, I wouldn't dare to conclude that Luo Zhao's value has been exhausted. After all, although he overestimated himself, his strength is still good and can be used as a useful chess piece. But now it seems that Wang Lu doesn't care about this chess piece and doesn't have the patience to play with him. Xu Si was confused, but he still accurately grasped one point. Do you think Wang Lu doesn't like Luo Xiao? Dead Face didn't answer, but said, next, tell your people to pay attention to Luo Zhao's movements and inform me in time. Xu Si curiously asked, didn't you say that all the projects related to him will be stopped? However, Dead Face turned his back and focused on reading a book in his hand, no longer paying attention to Xu Si. Chapter 693. Recently, that silly Luo Xiao has been quite quiet, which makes people a bit bored. In the Immortal 5 area, it was still that quiet courtyard. Wang Lu put down the writing brush in his hand and looked like he wanted to continue. As his secretary, Hai Yunfan had to remind him, Wang Lu, now there are more than 100 people working overtime with you. Don't take the lead in slacking off. Wang Lu sneered and said, more than 100 people working overtime still need me, the boss, to be busy, which can only mean that they are incompetent. According to the principle of survival of the fittest, they should all be fired. In order to keep their jobs, I have to take a break from my busy schedule to slack off. Hai Yunfan suddenly wanted to throw the writing brush away. Wang Lu, this single-bird man, was living in the office anyway, so it didn't matter if he worked overtime and got hemorrhoids. However, he had a wife. During this time, he had been working overtime with Wang Lu every day, so Fei Fei had already complained a little. However, if he told the truth, Wang Lu would definitely suggest that he find a few strong men to comfort Fei Fei. This slut had always been vicious to married people. After thinking about it, Hai Yunfan said, "You look more and more like your master now." Wang Lu immediately threw the writing brush away and said, "Who is like that slut? I, your father, have worked hard for the Wuxia League and can be called a model for the world, a teacher for all ages. Don't have eyes but fail to recognize Mount Tai. Mount Tai, please don't slack off. This deity stage team fight will start in 5 days, but the plan is only half done, it's really." Wang Lu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely finish it before the fight starts. You just have to make sure that the details of the deductions made by those who work overtime outside the room are not wrong." Hai Yunfan sighed and said, "Those who work overtime are the elite forces of the major sects who are good at deduction, and they have been reviewed many times, so there will be no mistakes. The problem is that your deadline can't be stuck on the day before the fight. When the plan is made, you should at least give people time to adapt, right? This is the most important game since the start of the grand competition. Even the head of your Lingjian school is going to take action. You should at least be more professional." Wang Lu said, "It's because of my professionalism that I've been so meticulous with the proposal. Otherwise, I could have just written a 3-word mantra and done with it. I could have finished the draft 10 days ago." Hai Yunfan was slightly curious. 3-syllable Sanskrit mantra? Go 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 go. Help, help, help. Disperse, disperse, disperse. F***CK. F***CK. How about it? Was it concise and comprehensive? Did it effectively cover all the possible situations in a team battle? Hai Yunfan sighed and ignored Wang Lu, concentrating on the matters at hand. After Wang Lu had his fill of fishing, he began to draft a battle plan. 5 days later, the 5-person team battle of deity stage would officially start in the Immortal One area. This was the highest standard fight in the past few months, so there was no room for mistakes. The candidates for the battle had long been determined. The sect leader of Spirit Sword Sect, Feng Yin Daoist Master, would lead the team. The other 4 super sects would each send 1 person, and then carefully selected 5 substitutes to form a team of 10 people. In terms of individual strength, this team of 10 people could basically represent the highest level of the Wuxia League. It was extremely difficult to further strengthen it. Therefore, if they wanted to improve their odds of winning, they had to work hard on the pre-battle preparation. This would also be the first time since the start of the Wuxia League that they would really go all out. The cheerleading plan, which was previously regarded as a joke by many people, was officially ready to be implemented. The pill furnace rooms of the major sects had been operating at full capacity in the past few days. Secret medicine, immortal medicine, and even forbidden medicine had been continuously refined. Xingjing sect had opened their treasure house and allowed the contestants to borrow their magical treasures. Basically, everything that could be done had been done to the extreme. Only Wang Lu's battle plan had not yet come out, which really made many people anxious. However, people also knew the importance of this plan, so it was inevitable that Wang Lu's work would be slow. The burden was too heavy. This group of Daoist masters of deity stage was famous in 9 regions, but in the grand competition, they were not as good as those King Pill. In the King Pill, there were at least heaven-defying talents like Wang Wu and Wang Lu. Among the deity stage cultivators, perhaps only Feng Yin had a chance of winning in a one-on-one fight. The rest of them were simply unable to compete with Dixian. And this gap would be more obvious in the team battle. Dixian had joined forces to resist the fallen immortals, so what kind of situation had they not seen? What kind of dangerous situation had they not experienced? Their team cooperation was by no means comparable to the temporary team of the Wanxian League. If the individual strength and team cooperation were not as good as the opponent, how could they fight this battle? In fact, everyone had thought about this problem, but no one had thought about the result. Wang Lu said that he probably had a way, which made people even more amazed, so they threw the burden to him. Fighting for a glimmer of hope in the impossible was what Wang Lu had to do now. After no one knew how long, when Hai Yunfan began to feel dizzy, there came the sound of a pen hitting the table. Turning his head, he saw Wang Lu put down the pen in his hand with a relieved look, which made Hai Yunfan quite surprised. Is it done? The second half seems to be going very well. Wang Lu nodded and said, yes, I thought of a way to cut through the Gordian knot. Cut through the Gordian knot? Hai Yunfan was pleasantly surprised at first, but then he suddenly had an ominous premonition. He had been with Wang Lu for a long time, so he felt that if he said such a thing, it would definitely not be the result he wanted. Sure enough, the next moment, Wang Lu's words made Hai Yunfan's chest feel stuffy, and his blood and qi surged. I've decided to overturn the previous plan and redo it. With that, Wang Lu burned the most critical pages in his hand. Hai Yunfan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He forcibly operated his cultivation method and used his magical power that was close to True Yuan to move his blood and qi so that he didn't vomit blood. Wang Lu explained, I just calculated it myself. According to the normal method, no matter how I calculate, the chance of winning is 0. Seeing that Hai Yunfan was still angry, Wang Lu had to continue to explain, deduction is not omnipotent. Even if your family's supreme Tianluan calculated, it's impossible for a mortal to win against Tichu. Now we are facing a similar situation. The strength gap is too big to be made up by deduction. What's more, it's not like the other side doesn't have the ability to calculate. Xuan Xian's calculation ability is stronger than Supreme Tianluan's, and of course, much stronger than mine. His only weakness is that he can't calculate me, but if I don't fight in this battle, his interference will be much less. Hai Yunfan said, we have known about these situations for a long time. But you didn't choose to give up before, and you said that although the situation is difficult, there is still a chance of winning. That's why so many of us are willing to help you. Why do you suddenly give up now? Wang Lu said, I thought there was a glimmer of hope before because the group of overtime workers outside miscalculated. What? Wang Lu waved his hand and pulled out a few pieces of paper full of calculations. This is the calculation report about the effect of the Soaring Dragon Array. It tells me that there are 17 spells that can achieve a 5-fold effect in the Soaring Dragon Array. Based on this, I designed a set of serial killing array. If I'm lucky, I can instantly kill one of the opponents. Then there's a chance to fight 5 against 4. However, the 5-fold effect of the Soaring Dragon Array is really amazing, so I have some doubts. However, the Soaring Dragon Array is a secret of Royal Soldier Sect, and the core formula has not been made public. At that time, I was busy calculating other things, so I had to believe it for the time being. However, later on, no matter how I think about it, I felt that it was wrong. After reading this calculation several times, I finally determined that the idiot of Royal Soldier Sect must have made a mistake when providing the core formula, and a certain key value was miscalculated by 10 times. The actual result is not even 5 times, it's already very good to have a 2-fold increase. Upon hearing this, Hai Yunfan was stunned. He quickly grabbed the calculation paper and carefully reviewed it. After a long time, he was still confused. Wang Lu contemptuously took back the calculation paper. Is this the elite talent of 10,000 art sect? Hai Yunfan coughed and said, I'm a secretary, not a calculator. In short, do you think the people of Royal Soldier Sect gave you the wrong data? Wang Lu said, it should not be intentional. Royal Soldier Sect is not good at fine calculation. The Soaring Dragon Array is an ancient array. I'm afraid no one has ever asked them to refine and digitize the various effects of the array before. However, this time, the construction period is tight, so some mistakes are inevitable. I think the several overtime workers of Royal Soldier Sect have tried their best, and Xiang Liang personally came to supervise the work, which is also full of sincerity. It's really that the intelligence of the barbarians is limited. Hai Yunfan said. Isn't your sex discrimination too blatant? How could there be discrimination? I treat everyone equally. In front of you, a disciple of 10,000 Arts Sect, I criticize the intelligence of Royal Soldier Sect. In front of the disciples of Royal Soldier Sect, I will also ridicule the disciples of 10,000 Arts Sect as sissies. What the? You treat everyone equally? Hai Yunfan didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but soon, he really couldn't laugh anymore. Wang Lu, now that the plan is invalid, do you want to give up on this match? Wang Lu said, of course not. There are so many people watching. If I say that the calculation is wrong, the plan will be invalid. Not to mention that my reputation will be ruined. What about the previous reimbursement? Hai Yunfan asked in surprise. You choose not to give up because of this reason? Wait a minute, what's with the reimbursement? I don't know about it at all. Wang Lu said, of course, I can't let you know without going through the formal process. In short, don't worry, I will come up with an alternative plan as soon as possible. Hai Yunfan asked. What about those people outside? Let them disperse? Of course not. There's no need for a third person to know that the original plan is invalid except for you. Nowadays, people's psychological quality is generally poor. If they know more, I'm afraid that there will be some bullshit like the heavenly book building. What's more, the new plan also needs coolies to help with the calculation. Let them continue to stick to their posts and serve the Wanxian League. Hai Yunfan sighed. He wanted to ignore Wang Lu and continue to work, but he didn't know how he could work on a plan that had already been scrapped. He wanted to go home to find his wife, but he also felt that it was a bit irresponsible to leave more than 100 colleagues behind. Seeing him depressed, Wang Lu said with a smile, I'll give you a difficult mission. The new plan can be used. Hai Yunfan said, what? Help me prepare the compensation plan for the deceased in advance. I want it for all 10 people. Compensation plan? Hai Yunfan was stunned. You mean, you don't think that no one will die in this team fight, do you? Wang Lu's voice was clear and cold. Even if Royal Soldier Sect didn't make that idiotic mistake and my plan was perfectly executed, at least 2 of the 5 people would die in the end. With the new plan, it wouldn't be surprising even if the team was wiped out. I know that a Taoist master of deity stage usually has a means of resurrection, but can you guarantee that those means will be effective in the arena? Hearing this, Hai Yunfan suddenly raised a question. Why not? Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was also startled, and then he tightly frowned. Yeah, why can't it work? You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.